All right, good afternoon. Welcome back. Hopefully everybody enjoyed their lunch. We are ready to go ahead and proceed with the evidence in this case from the state.
Thanks, Your Honor. So, Mr. Lowry, to follow up on something we talked about before, what was your role in this investigation, in this case?
I was initially lead before it was given or taken by the GBI.
Okay.
Because I was on call that day.
Okay, so you were a lead detective?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so before we took a break, you testified that Mr. Bryan hollered at the truck y'all got him. You
Yes,
remember
ma'am.
that?
I do.
And then he proceeded to get into his truck. Is
Yes.
that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about what happened after that. If you can just look at the screen. Sure, I can. Okay. And Mr. Lowry, have you seen these excerpts
I
from
have.
the transcript?
I have.
Have we gone through them together in preparation for your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so if you can just read there on page 5, starting at line 18 and down to line 25.
So I just kind of sat there for a minute and didn't really know what to do. And then he was trucking. So, I mean, he closed in on me quick. And as soon as he got up to me, I overshot the road. I was kind of angled. I overshot the road and forced him to go down into the ditch right there. I say, okay. And then Mr. Bryan says, I don't know if he went through.
Okay, so starting from line 18, who is talking there?
Mr. Bryan.
Okay, so he's saying he kind of angled and then overshot the road and forced Ahmaud to go into a ditch. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and which road are we on here? Which road is he talking about, Mr. Bryan?
I think this is still on Burford.
Burford Road, okay. Is that right outside his driveway?
Yes.
Okay. So let's now talk about the second incident with Mr. Bryan and Ahmaud. If you can just read here, starting from line 1.
The water or over it or what, but he bounced around me. So I was hanging on pretty good. And I think I backed up into my driveway and came back this way.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there. Is this page a continuation of the one that we just went over?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so can you start then reading from 25 and then go straight on to the second page?
I can.
Okay?
Mr. Bryan says, I don't know if he went through the water or over it or what, but he bounced around me. So I was hanging on pretty good. And I think I backed up into my driveway and came back this way.
Okay, and what do you say?
I say, okay. And then Mr. Bryan says, and I angled my truck at him again. I think he kind of turned around. I missed him or whatever, but that's when I told the other officer this. We were still right about in this area right here. And I say, mm-hmm.
Okay, so this second incident here, when Mr. Bryan is talking about angling my truck at him again, which road are they on with this second incident?
I believe this is still on Burford, just maybe a little bit further down.
Okay, so Burford Road.
Right, I'm gonna leading characterization, second incident. That wasn't what the witness said.
Go ahead and explain.
So when we talk about second incident, Mr. Lowry, what are we talking about? What are we referencing?
The second time that Mr. Bryan would have tried to use his vehicle to steer Mr. Arbery off the road.
Okay. From your interview with Mr. Bryan, was there a third time he tried to do that?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that. Okay, so looking at, let me see what page we're on here. Page 6, lines 11 through 20. Can you go ahead and read that, please?
I can. Mr. Bryan says, not back to the road that it happened on yet. I think I backed up and kind of went at him a little bit, and I can see that he was coming towards the truck. I mean, I had my window down. He was coming. He was trying to get in the truck at that point, so I slammed it into drive and jumped out away from him. I mean, and me and the other officer looked. My truck's dirty. You can see where his hands were on the side, almost at the door, where he was, trying to get it open. So,
Okay, so here, when Mr. Bryan says not back to the road that it happened on yet, which road did it happen on, meaning the incident?
Holmes Road.
Okay, so at this point, Mr. Bryan's saying he's not back on that road yet. So which road was Mr. Bryan on when this happened?
Still Burford.
Burford Road, okay. Is there another time in the interview that Mr. Bryan doubles back to talk about here again with his belief that the victim tried to get into his truck?
I object to the characterization doubles back. Can we find another way to ask that question that's a little less loaded?
I can try. So, Mr. Lowry, during the course of your interview with Mr. Bryan, does he mention for a second time that his belief that the victim tried to get into his truck?
I don't believe if he mentioned it a second. You're talking about during the sit-down interview. He did say it there, yes.
Okay.
I don't remember if that was the first or a second time.
Okay, so go ahead and look in your transcript. Don't read anything, just look to refresh your recollection at page 18, lines 1 through 13.
Oh, yes, okay.
Okay, so in this quote that we just read, Mr. Bryan is talking about backing up and going at the victim and saying his belief that the victim was trying to get into his truck, right?
I'm gonna object to the leading going at.
Well, it's what he's saying here.
I don't think she's got that correct.
The transcript's on the screen, so, ladies and gentlemen, the transcript is what reflects the statement of the defendant. Go ahead.
So Mr. Bryan, again, mentioned something about the victim, his belief that the victim was going into his truck on page 18, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's look at that one. If you can just read that, starting from line 1, going to line 13.
Okay. I say, okay, all right, and you said that you had handprints on your truck from where the guy was trying to get into it. Mr. Bryan says, I feel pretty sure that's what he was doing. I mean, I can't say for sure that he wasn't on the door. I didn't give him a chance to get to the door, but after I angled him off the side of the road, and I kind of went on past him because I didn't hit him, wish I might have took him out and not get him shot. But I probably got past him a little bit, and he come up on me, and I could see him in my mirror, and he was coming for the door, and I seen his hands on right behind the door.
Okay, so in this one, Mr. Bryan's talking about wishing he had hit the victim, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, was there a fourth incident where Mr. Bryan is talking about making contact with the victim in the case?
Yes, I believe the one you're referring to is the intersection of Holmes and Satilla, or Holmes and Burford.
Okay, so let's look at that one. So going to page 13, lines 9 through 25, go ahead and read that for us, please.
Mr. Bryan says, I think I backed into my drive and then continued on Burford towards, and I say, the entrance, because you said you passed the road first. Mr. Bryan says, yeah, towards the entrance, but I confronted him, angled at him again before we got to the road he was laying on. I say, yeah. Mr. Bryan says, right at the house that's on the left-hand side if you're headed towards the entrance of the neighborhood. And I say, you're talking about before the intersection of the road where it actually happened on? And Mr. Bryan says, right. And I say, okay.
Okay, so which street were they on when this happened?
This would have still been Burford at the intersection of Holmes.
Okay, so that corner there on Burford.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there another time in your interview where Mr. Bryan talks about this incident that we just looked at again?
Could you refresh me?
I can. Go ahead and turn to page 14, lines 1 through 18. And just read it to yourself and let me know if your memory has been refreshed.
Okay, yes.
Okay? So at some point, he kind of talked about that some more during the interview, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's look at that. So page 14, lines 1 through 18. Go ahead and read that, please.
Mr. Bryan says, yes. I mean, before then, I angled at him again. I say, okay. Mr. Bryan says, and he jumped out of the way, and I went on past. And I say, and then you passed the intersection of the road that it actually took place on? And Mr. Bryan says, right. I say, did you back up or just U-turn because you said you? And then Mr. Bryan said, I was fixing, I put it in reverse and was going to back up at him. I say, mm-hmm. Mr. Bryan says that's when he made his move to go down the road it happened on. And I say, okay, so you backed up and then turned down that road? And Mr. Bryan says, yep.
Okay. So what area are they in, meaning Mr. Bryan and the victim? What area are they in right here when this is going on?
I'm believing this is still the intersection of Burford and Holmes, or Burford where it turns into Satilla and Holmes.
Okay, because Mr. Bryan is saying that he jumped out of the way and I went past him. And then when you pass the intersection of the road it actually took place on, and then he says right. And what's the intersection where it took place?
Burford and Holmes, or Satilla and Holmes.
Satilla and Holmes, okay. And then you asked him, did you back up or just U-turn? And Mr. Bryan says, I was fixing, I put it in reverse and was going to back up at him. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then Mr. Bryan says, and that's when he made his move to go down the road it happened on. And what road did it happen on?
Holmes Road.
Okay. So this right here is when the victim made his move to go down Holmes Road where he was ultimately killed.
Yes.
So was there another incident of attempted contact between Mr. Bryan and the victim?
I'm going to object to the leading.
Was there another?
Mine is a different objection, but I'll let you rule on it.
That we're telling the witness the answer. We're not just referring to the number of the incident.
I'm permitted a little bit with the use of transcripts, so let's, if we're narrowing in on a portion of the transcript.
Okay.
So, Your Honor, we've been extremely patient, but there was a pretrial order regarding the overuse of the word victim. It can come out incidentally or by accident, but it is better to use the name of the person we're talking about. Victim is a characterization.
It's just to be consistent here, again, the court's ruling is already in the record. So.
I'll try to lessen my use of the word victim, Judge. So, Mr. Lowry, did something also happen from Mr. Bryan's statement on Holmes Road?
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
So I want to point you to page 15. Actually, before we get there, page 7, lines 9 through 16. And ask you to read right here what's on the screen.
Okay. Mr. Bryan says, all right, so I backed up and started going down that way. I think I angled at him again, kind of forced him off the road or something right in here, and he turned around. He turned around right here, the black guy did. He turned around maybe down this far or so, but he turned around and started running back the other way, and I pulled into a drive or something and started to turn around. I say, okay.
Okay. And was there a continuation of things happening on Holmes Road?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about that. So now looking at page 15, lines 13 through 25.
I'm sorry, I'm going to object to the characterization of continuing when these statements are 8 pages apart. You've gone from page 7 to page 15, it's a continuation.
Okay, just go ahead and rephrase that then.
Okay. The last one, the last quote that we put up on the screen, was that the last thing that happened on Holmes Road? Not this one, but the one before.
Oh, I'm sorry, could you put it
Sure.
back?
I'll repeat it. You want me to put it back up here?
Or just repeat it?
Okay.
Either way.
Yeah, so when we talked about this last quote, was that essentially the end of what happened on Holmes
Okay.
Road? Okay. Did something happen after that?
Yes.
Let's talk about that. So going to page,
I'm going to object. We need to clarify, since the state has already acknowledged that this has gone through multiple times. Are we mixing together two different statements in the same statement? What are we doing here? I object.
I believe that's something you can talk to him about when you get him on cross, right?
You can go ahead and clarify that, go ahead.
Clarify what?
No, I'm just saying, it can be clarified on cross, go ahead.
Okay. So, Mr. Lowry, can you please read page 15 from line 13 to 25?
Yes. I say, so you went straight and missed the intersection. Mr. Bryan says, right. I say, and you were going to back up? Mr. Bryan says, and then I backed over on that other road. And I say, went up this road? And Mr. Bryan says, yeah. And he, at that point, he's still running from me. Okay, he's running from me, and I'm coming at him. But in any case, he turned around and started coming back. At that point, I think I may have angled at him again or something, but I didn't put much emphasis on it. I just wanted to get turned around.
Okay. And what road is Mr. Bryan and Ahmaud on when we see this happening?
This is on Holmes Road.
On Holmes Road, okay. And Mr. Bryan says, he's running from me and I'm coming at him. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, was there something else that happened on Holmes Road after what we just discussed?
Yes, that was the shooting and the murder itself took place right after.
Okay. And is there another portion of Mr. Bryan's interview where he talks about something leading up to that? And I'll direct you to refresh your recollection to page 7, lines 19 through 25.
Yes.
I missed the page.
7, 19 through 25. You see it?
Yes.
Okay. So that was a yes,
Yes.
Mr. Lowry? Okay, let's talk about that. Go ahead and read this to the jury.
Mr. Bryan says, at this point, I didn't really know, but I got turned around good. And by that time is when I rounded that corner enough to see the black guy was right there, but really wasn't running anymore. Looked like at this point, like I say, he just had enough of the running and he was confronted.
Okay. So Mr. Bryan is saying when he rounded the corner enough to see the black guy really wasn't running anymore. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it looked like at that point he was confronted.
Yes.
Who was confronted?
Mr. Arbery.
At some point during your interview, did you ask Mr. Bryan whether he had ever seen Mr. Arbery before?
Yes.
Okay. And what did he tell you?
No.
Okay. Did you ask him, if you can just go ahead and read page 18 on to 19, starting from lines 23. So is this where you ask him, have you seen him before?
Yes.
Okay, just read what he says.
He says, I have not seen him. I say, okay, do you know of him being involved in any past instances? Mr. Bryan says, that I know of, no. I say, okay. And he says, I mean, I just hear of stuff that's been happening around the neighborhood. Nobody said anything.
So during the course of your interview, did Mr. Bryan tell you that there might be some sort of evidence on his truck?
Yes.
Okay, what did he tell you about that?
That he believed there were palm prints or fingerprints and dents on his truck.
Okay, and what did you do with that information?
After the interview, I went outside and processed his truck, photographed and collected fingerprints and fibers.
Okay, and where was that truck located?
It was in the front of the Glenn County Police Department.
Okay, did you also you said you took photographs?
Yes, ma'am.
You've seen all the pictures? 200, 202, 205, 207, 209, 211, 213. May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Lowry, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes, and some numbers are missing, but we'll go states 200, 201, 202, 206, 205, 207, 209, 210, 211, 214, 213, and 215.
Okay.
Go ahead and look at these and tell me if you recognize them.
Yes. These
Okay.
look like the pictures that I took.
That you took, and are they fair and accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do they appear to be altered in any way?
No, ma'am.
At this time, we would tender states 200 to 202, 205 to 207, 209 to 211, and 213 to 215.
No objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
They're admitted.
Thank you. Permission to publish, Judge.
Go ahead.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so looking at states 200, Mr. Lowry, can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yes, that's kind of a faraway shot of a dent that was on the driver's side of Mr. Bryan's truck on the bed part of it over the tailgate, or over the gas cap.
Okay, and Judge, is it okay if he can step down just to point to where all this stuff is?
Yeah, make sure you're very careful doing that, stepping that off.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And just make sure, maybe we can kind of use this microphone. Oh, you don't have to
Right,
point on the
yeah, right
screen.
there on the
We're just gonna
document.
point maybe with like this pen or your finger, whatever you want to use. So where are we looking at? What part of the truck are we looking at here?
This is the driver's side of the truck on the back by the bed.
Okay, and what did you find on that side of the truck?
There were several smudges, looked like fingerprints, a dent, and some fibers.
Okay, so in states 200, what do we see here?
In this, you can see one of the dents. That's going to be that right there.
Okay, and you also mentioned some fibers.
That's correct.
Okay, do we see the fibers or what you believed to be fibers in states 200?
I don't think you can really see them in this, but there's a closer shot of them. They're right above this dent on this black strip of plastic.
Okay, so they're in that area, we just can't see them in this picture.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm going to slide one more past you. So looking at states 201, what do we see here in this picture?
I see some of the smudges and prints that I was talking about. You can see a little bit of one right here on the front of the back driver's side door, and another one right here just above the handle of the driver's door.
Okay. So looking at 202, what are we looking at in 202?
This is just a close-up of the last picture that was shown with the same smudge right at the start of the back driver's side door, and then the smaller smudge over the handle of the driver's door.
Okay. 206?
This is the same shot again, just from a different angle. I was trying to work with the reflection and everything in the background, but
Okay.
larger smudge on just the very start of the back driver's side door, and then smaller smudge on the driver's door just above the handle.
Okay. And looking at states 205.
This, I believe, is are two smudges that were just above the, I guess you would call it weather stripping, between the door and the window of the driver's door.
Okay. States 207.
And this is just a closer shot of the same bigger smudge that we saw on the start of the backside driver's door.
Okay.
Yeah,
So this area right here, what area is this?
that would be the driver's door.
Driver's door. And then what's this?
The rear side or rear driver's side door.
What about states 209?
209 is, I believe, it was a smudge in the middle of the door right here.
And which door?
This would be the driver's side rear door.
And states 210.
Yeah, just be aware of, you know, juror behind you, so
Oh, I'm
as you're
sorry.
moving, she's moving, so just be aware.
This is another smudge. I believe this was also on the driver's side door. I just don't recall if this was from the front door or the back door.
Okay, so driver's side, either front door or back door.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, and states 211.
In this picture, you can't really see what I was trying to capture, but right about here, there was some kind of weird impression that it looked like it came from a volleyball. I could see it's like Y shapes that would be like hexagonal on a volleyball or a soccer ball or something.
Okay, but it's not visible in states 211.
No, you can't see it at all. It was very, very faint.
Okay, did you process that at all?
No, I think I just photographed it.
Okay, and just tell the jury why not.
I thought it was a ball.
Okay.
I thought it was impact with a soccer ball or something.
Because it looked like a ball shape?
Yes.
Okay. States 214.
This is going to be closer of the white fibers that I mentioned, above that dent and above the gas cap on the driver's side of the vehicle.
And can you just point to where those supposed white fibers are?
It'll be right here on this plastic strip.
Okay. And 213.
This is the same photo, just closer, the white fibers on the plastic strip.
Okay. And state 215.
And this is the same, the white fibers on that same area of the same plastic strip.
Okay, and you can have a seat. Thank you so much. So did you note anything about the fibers as compared to the dent that you saw?
That it was directly above it. It looked like they could have happened at the same time.
Okay. Are you able to say, just by looking at all this, when any kind of contact happened?
No.
Okay, so you just saw whatever it was on the truck?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you talked about processing the smudges, as you call them. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us how you go about doing that.
I used black fingerprint powder, a fingerprint brush. I used the black powder and they call it developing the latent prints or the ridge details.
Okay.
After they become more visible with the black powder, it's collected with Searchy brand tape and placed on it's basically an index card, call them fingerprint cards, so I think there's like a light layer of lamination or something on them.
Okay. So do you take a brush, put powder on the prints and brush it?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, and then you lift it with the tape?
Correct.
Okay, and what do you do after that?
Those are submitted into a fingerprint box for those that have, I believe it's IAFIS, the certification that allows them to do fingerprint matchups and fingerprint searches.
Okay. Now, what about the fibers? What did you do with those?
Those I collected with tape. I fixed those to a black index card and I submitted those to the GBI.
Okay, all right. So after your interview with Mr. Bryan, did you find out that the person who was killed was identified?
Yes,
Okay, and how was he identified?
through fingerprints.
Okay, And what was the identification?
Mr. Ahmaud Arbery.
Okay. Now, after talking to Mr. Bryan, did you submit his phone for anything?
Yes, I did.
Okay, what did you do with his phone?
After he signed the consent waiver, consent form, I handed it off to Sergeant Oliver for downloading.
Okay. And did Sergeant Oliver then turn it over to another investigator?
Yes.
Who?
Investigator Marcy.
Okay. Now, after that, do you recall ever going over to 220 Satilla Drive?
I'm sorry, I forgot the number. Which house was 220?
Do you recall a construction site or a
yes.
house under construction being a part of this investigation?
Yes, it was
Okay.
much later that evening that I went there though, but yes.
But you went there?
Yes.
Okay. And who did you go with?
I believe it was Investigator Marcy, Investigator Ramos, and maybe Sergeant Oliver.
Okay. And did you see any like expensive tools there in that home, in that construction site?
I think I remember seeing saws or drills or something like that.
Okay. So you saw multiple tools there?
I don't know about multiple. I don't remember how many I saw, but I do remember seeing tools there.
Okay. And how did the structure appear to you?
On the inside, it was mostly just framing. There weren't. I don't think walls were erected in all the building yet. It was missing doors and windows.
Okay. Did it appear that it was rummaged through in any way?
No,
Okay. How did it appear?
like a house under construction.
Okay.
Yeah, just unrummaged, I guess.
Unrummaged. Could you tell if anything had been moved or destroyed or anything like that?
I couldn't.
You couldn't tell. Okay. Now, and is that still on February 23rd that we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So the next day, February 24th, after meetings in the morning, what did you do?
I think I had training for the rest of the day. I think I had SWAT training.
SWAT.
Other investigators went out and did a canvass in the neighborhood while I was in training, but yeah.
Okay, so you were doing SWAT training.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After that, did you do anything else on the case?
I'd have to go back and review. I can't remember in detail immediately.
Okay, so I want to direct your attention to March 4th, 2020, and a person by the name of Daniel Alcott.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, so did you meet with Mr. Alcott?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay.
I believe it arose because I guess he was concerned about the number of vehicles stopping around his house at the site, and he was concerned that the public was going to think that he was somehow involved.
Okay,
So he had a young child at home, his wife and all that. I went over and spoke to them, heard their concerns, and
Okay.
got kind of an additional, or I guess a first-time statement from Mr. Alcott. I wasn't ever sure if somebody else had spoken to him that day, but I think he said that he.
well, so we're not going to get into what he said.
Oh, I
okay?
apologize.
No,
I
that's
apologize.
fine. But you met with him on March 4th.
Yes,
Okay, so on March 5th, did you send the fibers off to GBI for testing?
yes.
Okay. And had the prints been sent already? The prints that you left it?
I don't know. I don't know if those were reviewed in-house or if they were done by the GBI. I think it's all in-house review, but I'm not sure.
You're not sure about that? Okay. Now, on March 5th, what was the status of your case as the lead detective at that time? Was it a closed case? Was it an open case? What was the status?
It was still open, but not gaining much traction.
Okay. So it was sort of inactive?
Yes.
Okay.
Objection, that is not what he said.
Yeah, still didn't say what it is.
Okay. When you say not getting much traction, what do you mean?
I think inactive was a fair summary.
Okay. Now, before this case, had you ever looked at the citizen's arrest law that was on the books in Georgia?
I'm sure I did.
Action, relevance.
Your Honor, it goes to how he handled the case, given the fact that citizen's arrest is a part of the case.
I thought the state was making the same objection yesterday to another witness.
I'm not asking him to get into the law and what it is, but had he ever looked at it?
And what's that relevant to?
Well, let's see if it's relevant.
We join the relevance objection, what he knows about citizens arrest
Well,
laws.
that wasn't the question, not what he knows.
Had he ever looked at the law? That's it.
Yeah, well, and that's not relevant whether he's ever looked at the law, that's sustained.
So, did the word citizen's arrest come up at any point during any of the interviews of the defendants in this case?
No.
I believe he interviewed Brian.
That's sustained.
Did the word citizen's arrest come up in Roddy Bryan's interview?
No.
So at some point, did you become aware, I think you mentioned that the GBI took over the investigation?
Yes.
Okay, and did you turn your file over to them after that?
I don't know if it was me specifically that handed it over, but it was relinquished. Everything that we had was provided to them.
Okay. Now, going back to your interview with Mr. Bryan, did he have a cell phone on him during this incident where he was chasing in his truck?
He did.
Okay. Did he ever say that he called 911?
No.
Did Mr. Bryan ever say that Ahmaud had a weapon
No.
on him that day?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did Mr. Bryan ever say Ahmaud made any verbal threats towards him or any other person that day?
No.
Okay. Did he make any threatening gestures towards Mr. Bryan or anybody else that day?
I'm going to object. I let 4 leading questions go in a row. I think that's number 5. Can we find a way to ask the questions that doesn't suggest the answer to the witness?
It's not suggesting the answer. He can say yes or no.
In this context, no, she can't.
Yeah, they are leading questions. The statement's been provided by the state.
Okay. Yeah. So, Mr. Larry, what, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about seeing Ahmaud commit a crime before he jumped in his truck?
He didn't.
He didn't say anything about that.
No.
What, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about arresting or telling Ahmaud he was under arrest for criminal trespass?
He didn't.
What, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about telling Ahmaud he was under arrest for loitering?
He didn't.
What, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about telling Ahmaud he was under arrest for burglary?
He didn't.
What, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about telling Ahmaud he was under arrest for attempted burglary?
He didn't.
What, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about telling Ahmaud he was under arrest for carjacking?
He didn't.
Okay. What, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about telling Ahmaud he was under arrest for aggravated assault?
He didn't.
Okay. Did Mr. Bryan ever tell Ahmaud during that chase that he was under arrest for anything?
No, not that I was made aware of.
So at the point where your file was turned over to GBI, did that end your involvement in the case?
No.
Did it end your involvement in the case?
No.
Okay.
I had to keep taking calls as they came in regarding the case, but I would just forward that information to the GBI.
To GBI? You
Yes.
still got calls as the lead detective that you would forward to GBI?
Yes.
Okay. Other than that, did you do anything else?
It was calls for other concerned citizens and calls from the defendants in the case for their security, stuff like that.
Okay.
But all just forwarded to the GBI.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. One more question. What, if anything, did Mr. Bryan say about seeing Ahmaud throw anything from his person during the entirety of that chase on that day?
He didn't.
He didn't say anything about that?
No.
Okay. That's all I have for you. The defense might have some questions for you, okay?
Mr. Jones.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Have we met before?
Just when I worked at the county, I think. See each other in the courthouse.
Very good. My first question for you is this. Wouldn't you agree, based on your training and experience, that context is the key to understanding the truth behind someone's words?
Yes.
Okay. And that's something that you personally think is very important in your work.
Context, yes. I think it can be.
If you understood Roddy Bryan to have meant that he deliberately attacked Mr. Arbery with his truck, if you understood him to say that he made an aggravated assault with a motor vehicle upon Mr. Arbery, could you have ignored that?
No, that wasn't the way I interpreted it at the time, though.
Yes. Well, obviously, that would be a very serious violent felony. But that wasn't your understanding.
No, sir.
Okay. Roddy Bryan never denied following Mr. Arbery, did he?
No, sir.
Roddy Bryan never denied angling his vehicle ahead of Mr. Arbery.
No, sir.
Roddy Bryan never denied blocking the path of Mr. Arbery.
No, sir.
Roddy Bryan never denied cutting in ahead of Mr. Arbery or cutting him off.
That's correct, too.
He never denied trying to steer Mr. Arbery off the road.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But beyond that, all you can really do is speculate as to exactly how many times or exactly where Mr. Bryan did various things. Is that fair to say?
I don't know that I could say it's speculation. It was what he told me.
Okay, I'll rephrase. Is it fair to say that Mr. Bryan had trouble relating the events of that day in detail or in sequence?
I think everybody probably had trouble. There was a lot going on.
Fair enough. Now, I have a few other questions, and if I bounce around and you don't understand a question, you don't hesitate to say so.
Sure thing.
Okay. Do you have any personal relationship with Roddy Bryan?
No.
Okay. Have you ever seen him in the break room at the Glenn County Police Department?
Roddy Bryan?
Yeah.
No.
Have you ever seen him in the break room in the DA's office?
No.
Okay. You've certainly never taken classes with him.
No.
Okay. Is there any reason why you would give special treatment to Roddy Bryan?
No.
Okay. And your decisions in this case, personally, about how you went about your investigation, did they have anything whatsoever to do with whether Mr. Ahmaud Arbery was black or white?
No, sir.
I'm going to ask you a few questions about Mr. Bryan's demeanor, if I may.
Okay.
Did Roddy Bryan appear to you to be, at the time you spoke with him, mentally unstable?
No.
Did he appear to you to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs or other intoxicants?
No.
Did he come across to you as loud or boisterous?
No.
Did he come across to you as gleeful or bragging or boastful about his conduct that day?
No.
Did Mr. Bryan strike you as someone seeking attention or seeking the spotlight?
No.
Did Mr. Bryan drop F-bombs or other profanity during this interview?
I don't think so, but I'm not certain.
Okay. Was Mr. Bryan in any way disrespectful to you?
No, sir.
Is it fair to say that you personally in your department wanted Roddy Bryan's help to get to the truth about what happened to Ahmaud Arbery?
Yeah, I hope for compliance and cooperation from everybody I deal with.
At this point in time, you were not, quote unquote, after Mr. Bryan.
No, sir.
At this point, he's just a witness in your case.
Yes, sir.
And you're trying to reassure him that he's not the target of your investigation.
I don't really know that I can agree with that.
Fair enough. Is it fair to say that you were somewhat concerned,
Yes.
at least mildly concerned, about whether Mr. Bryan would quote-unquote freak out when you went through the consent form?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. Because you wanted his help.
Yes.
Now, efforts had already been made to extract data from Mr. Bryant's cell phone, am I correct?
I think that you're talking about on scene on the roadside.
Well, certainly on the roadside.
That had just off of verbal consent, but the actual Cellbrite download wasn't until after
Right.
the form.
Now, Mr. Bryant doesn't know anything about Cellbrite, to your knowledge.
Yes.
Objection to speculation about what Mr. Bryan knows.
I'll rephrase. Did you explain Cellbrite to Mr. Bryant?
I don't remember.
Okay, you had to go to, before you went to school, did you know what Cellbrite was?
No.
Okay. But the bottom line is, notwithstanding the fact that he's already given you his cell phone, your department, his cell phone on the scene, you know that you need more than that. Not just a consent, you need a different kind of extraction of the material than Mr. Minshew can do on the side of the road.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, in that context, again, I need an exhibit, my apologies. May I approach the witness? I won't approach the witness. I'm going to put it, and I've never done this before.
Just slide it right underneath.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Sir, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 298. That's the consent form in this case, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Bryan signed that for you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when you were advising him in the consent form, whether you were thinking about it at the time, you indicated that you were looking at aggravated assault and homicide. Okay. In context, the aggravated assault that you're investigating is the tragic shooting of Ahmaud Arbery.
Was that a question?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and that was your understanding, yes? And you would assume, based on what you said, that that would be Mr. Bryan's understanding.
Objection to speculation.
I'll rephrase.
Thank you.
Did you give Mr. Bryan any reason to believe that you were investigating anything different
Then an aggravated assault?
than the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And on this same line, in your police report, you summarized the salient facts about what Mr. Bryan was relating to you, did you not, in a written report?
Yes, I summarized them.
Okay. Is it fairly safe to say you've been trained in writing police reports? A little bit.
Yeah, I guess.
You went to school, and you certainly seem capable of using big words. Am I correct?
Sometimes.
Okay. Your summary of the testimony you've related today amounted essentially to one sentence in that report, and I'm going to direct your attention to the bottom third of the third paragraph, if you'll take a moment and look at that. Do you see the sentence Mr. Bryan described?
Yes.
Does that refresh your memory as to what you wrote in your report?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Bryan described maneuvering his truck.
Objection to hearsay, Judge. You can't just read the report.
Did you write in your report, your summary of all this discussion about what Mr. Bryan's doing out there on the street that day as maneuvering his truck?
Objection, Judge. You can't just read the report. It's hearsay.
It says, that's the police narrative, correct?
That's his.
Right. So he's describing what he heard in the statement that was just put in.
He's summarized all this testimony today.
Yeah, let's not read from his report then. I mean,
Okay.
you got the statement in. That's what I was discussing at the break.
I stand corrected. You were the lead agent in this case, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if at any point, I'll come back to that in a second. Now, is it fair to say that homicide cases are not like other cases?
Guess.
In some ways, they're not. Okay. Is it fair to say you tried to explain the process to Mr. Bryan as best you could
The process of what?
of your investigation, what you were doing?
Perhaps.
Okay. Now, you did not Mirandize Mr. Bryan at this time, am I correct?
I don't recall. I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
Okay. The consent that Mr. Bryan gave you was for the
Yeah.
consent form. Now, if Mr. Bryan, in your presence, had admitted to the commission of a major felony, would you not have felt obligated to Mirandize him at that time?
Yes.
Okay, because at that time, had he said something like that, had you or he understood it that way, he might not have been free to leave.
Objection is speculation, Judge.
Not speculation, it's fact.
Let's restate the question.
I'll restate it. If you had understood, or Mr. Bryan appeared to you to believe that he had admitted to a major felony, at that point you would have been obligated in your training to Mirandize him.
Yes.
Because at that point questions might have arisen as to whether he was free to leave.
Yes.
And you certainly wouldn't want to mess up your first murder investigation by failing to Mirandize a subject or a target of your investigation. Sir, at the time that this case was transferred from the Glenn County Police Department to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Mr. Bryan was still considered by your agency, well after the date of this interview, a witness in this case.
Yes.
Okay. And that's memorialized in the report that your agency provided to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Yes.
So is it fair to say that among the words that didn't come up in this interview besides citizen arrest was false imprisonment?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Among the legal terms that did not come up in this interview, in addition to citizen arrest, the phrase false imprisonment never came up in this interview
No.
because that wasn't your focus
No.
and that wasn't what you heard.
No.
And I believe you reassured Mr. Bryan that your agency is required to investigate any homicide, regardless of justification.
Maybe. I don't remember for sure.
Okay. Well, it's been a long time since you'd conducted this investigation. Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Directing your attention to the bottom third of page 2.
Okay, yes.
So basically, you assured Mr. Bryan that you were required to investigate any homicide, no matter what evidence there was of justification. That's your duty.
Yes.
And that's in fact what you were doing.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. In that context, that you're talking to a witness in this case, You didn't ask Roddy Bryan how far he got in school.
No.
You didn't ask Roddy Bryan if he had, for example, any learning disabilities.
No.
You didn't even ask him if he could read and write the English language, although that was presumed from the execution of the consent form. Okay. Now, there's been some discussion in this case of maps, and I'm not going to show you all of the maps, but I'm going to ask you if you recognize this document, which I believe is already in evidence. One moment, John.
If we're looking at numbering, let's get together and figure out what the numbering is so it can be clear.
I'm moving simply with the shortage of space. Our files are here and there, so I'll try not to be distracting.
All right, Your Honor.
Brian 1,
We're marking use Brian 50.
Brian 50.
I think that works. And Your Honor, technically, this exhibit in the record has a state exhibit number as well, but we're not going to use that for our purposes right now.
As long as it's clear where we are in the record, that Brian 50 identifies that.
Let the record reflect as shown what's been marked as defendant Brian's 50 to opposing counsel.
What number is it?
Brian 50.
Brian 50 has a different state number. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sir, I'm showing you what's been marked as Brian Exhibit 50. Have you seen that or a copy of that before?
Yes.
Is that the map that you used during the interview of Mr. Roddy Bryan?
Yes.
All right. Now, that map isn't as pretty as some in this case. But that's the map that, in your interview, in the transcript you referenced showing Mr. Bryan.
Yes.
And you reviewed the actual video of this interview, have you not?
Yes.
Hopefully recently.
Yes.
Okay. Is it not fair to say that at times Mr. Bryan appears to be so focused on this map and these squiggles on there that his answers are not always responsive to your actual questions?
I don't remember in enough detail to say one way or another.
Fair enough. This map is not color coordinated, it's all color coded, it's all one color, am I correct?
Aside from the blue ink, yes.
Yeah, and would it be fair to describe the blue ink by the end of this interview as chicken scratch?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would tender defendant Brian 50.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Now, you, in this interview, you went through the events with Mr. Bryan at least twice, am I correct?
maybe parts.
Wow, okay.
It was kind of all over.
Were you ever able to get a complete statement from start to finish from Mr. Bryan of exactly what happened?
I believe so.
So that's why you went over it more than once?
Always double check, make sure things that
Okay.
I'm not saying I got a perfectly clear understanding the first time he answered a question.
Okay. And you did go over some things more than once?
Yes.
All right. Is it fair to say that Mr. Bryan struggled at times to find the right words?
Objection to speculation.
Did he appear to struggle at times to find the words he wanted?
Yes.
Okay. And at one point, you acknowledged that issue. Am I correct?
I don't
Okay.
remember.
Well, at this point, you're trying to get to the truth, right?
Yes.
And anything that interferes with your ability to do that, you're going to try and rectify.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And reassuring Mr. Bryan is part of that, kind of like a kid at a ball game. Good job. That a boy? No, never mind. I'll withdraw the question.
He didn't have a chance to explain or
Oh,
answer it.
I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to prevent him from. Please, sir, please explain.
I didn't understand what you asked.
That's what I thought. So I'm just going to address it in a different way. Directing your attention to page 9, lines 13 through, I have 19, 13 through 19.
Objection, Judge, may we approach? This is something that Mr. Goff and I talked about before we even did this, and if we may approach, that would be great.
And maybe this would be a good time for a break.
Well, I need to address that. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can just have you step out into the jury room for just a moment.
All right, for the jury. Please be seated.
Okay. We leave the witness on the stand, or do I need to have the witness step down?
Either way.
I'm comfortable with this being here, Your Honor. I'm
Okay.
not telling
So
you
what is the issue?
Your Honor, what I'm trying to elicit is page 9, lines 14 and 19. Question from Investigator Lowry. I do understand where you're coming from because we've all, not necessarily this exact situation, we've all been there where crazy stuff happens that quick and you're still trying to process what just happened. Mr. Bryan responds affirmatively. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the kind of way it was. He's acknowledging that he's having problems processing these events that day. And that's in response to the detective's question. And it certainly goes to the rule of completeness. We've been bouncing all over this witness statement. And it's only fair that the jury know that he's having trouble processing what's going on. And because he can't process it, he's having trouble related to the officer. He's not trying to deceive the officer. He's struggling with his answers. And it goes to the weight the jury is going to give the answers that they have picked and chosen from this interview to present to the jury.
Your Honor, then Detective Lowry, his words aren't relevant to what Mr. Bryan understood or didn't understand. If Mr. Goff wants to get into what Mr. Bryan himself said, that's a different story, but I don't see how Mr. Lowry's words are relevant here. And essentially, the part that Mr. Goff wants to get into is all what Investigator Lowry said. And it does not go to the rule of completeness.
Your Honor, the rule of completeness goes to the conversation. It doesn't matter who started the conversation. What matters is that the conversation is complete. And for the conversation to be complete, that question and that answer, this jury needs to hear that.
Yeah, I'm going to permit it. I'm going to say, if you want to follow up on redirect, you're welcome to do so. All right, let's go get the panel.
That's the one that she gave to me. That's it.
Just make sure the witness actually has the transcript.
So, I'm sorry, Judge, I have one more thing as it pertains to that. Can I mention that
I
now?
don't
or-
have anybody to stop him at the door, so whatever it is, go quick.
Okay.
Because the moment that door opens, we need to stop.
So at the point where this statement comes in, that where we just discussed, that was Mr. Bryan, relaying the shooting portion of this incident. So Investigator Lowry was asking him about the actual shooting portion, what he saw, you know, what happened first, what happened second, when was the gun pulled, etc. So it would be unfair to the state because then I can't get up there and ask him specifically what Mr. Bryan was confused about. Because of course I can't get into that because of Bruton. So it would be one thing if Mr. Bryan was saying, well, I'm confused about what I did with my truck. But that is not the context of this statement that Mr. Goff is trying to get
Let me
into.
see the whole context,
Okay.
because that's not what I understood.
And it's lines 13 through...
14, it's 13 through 19. I said 14, it's 13 through 19.
But it starts on this page, Judge.
Okay, so, yep. Full transcript indicates, as the state has reflected, there is at least a page where there is a discussion, almost more than a page, of a discussion about the incident at the truck. And Investigator Lowry's question on page 9, starting at line 2, which is, yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. It's stuff like this. It happens in a blink of an eye, and then we start getting into all of this, appears to be directly related to the description of what occurred at the truck.
There's no question.
That, as the state says, the immediately preceding part says that, but the rule of completeness demands more. And, you know, it's putting us in a severance posture here where, again, we can't get to the meaning of what my client is saying.
Having read through it, again, the context of the quote that you are asking the court to permit is clearly with regard to the truck and the incident at the truck. I know you want to read that more broadly, but it is the investigator's comment to his description of what occurred at the truck that then results in this statement, the court, hey, we're not going to permit it. I understand the context now much better than I did before, and it's not coming in.
I'm not questioning the court's ruling. I do want to make it clear we're objecting under the rule of completeness, that we should be allowed to ask specifically the question and answer reflected at page 9, lines 13 to 19 of the transcript interview that Detective Lowry had with Roddy Bryan.
All right, thank you. Let's go get the panel.
All right, for the jury. Please be seated.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Again, I thank you for your patience. We've addressed the matters that we need to address before the court, and we are ready to proceed. Mr. Goff.
Thank you. Sir, I believe when you interviewed Mr. Bryan, he discussed his becoming involved in this matter more than once.
Yes.
And the first time, if I recall your testimony correctly from earlier today, he used the word overshot the road.
I think so.
Okay. Directing your attention to page 12, lines 23 to 25 through page 13, lines 1 to 7.
Okay. Okay.
The second time that you reviewed this with him, he described what he did as creeping out of the driveway. Is that correct?
Yes.
That he, quote, just crept out of the driveway good, unquote.
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to ascertain what creeping out of the driveway means as opposed to overshooting it? Did you follow up on that?
No, I took crept to mean slowly.
Okay. All right. And certainly that didn't have a whole lot to do with the shooting itself, did it?
Him creeping out of the driveway slowly? No.
Now, there were several points in time where he didn't seem to follow your question, were there not?
Objection to speculation.
Okay. Do you recall asking him whether he backed out of the ditch?
Yes.
Okay. And what was his answer?
No, I think I backed back into my drive.
Did that really answer your question?
No.
Okay. Was he looking at the map while he was doing this?
I don't remember.
Okay. Directing your attention to page 7. Is it fair to say that Mr. Bryan is fond of the word kinda or kind of?
Objection to speculation.
You're referring to the transcript itself, right?
I am. I'm referring to the portion of the transcript that I thought the state had already gone into.
It's overruled.
Directing your attention to page 7, line 11. Does Mr. Bryan use the word phrase kind of
Yes.
forced him? Okay. Were you able to ascertain what Mr. Bryan meant when he said kind of?
No, I don't know that I saw clarification on that.
Okay. Directing your attention to page 50.
Did you say 50?
Page 15, I'm sorry. Not page 50, page 15. And trying to find the line number for you, sir. All right, directing your attention to line 3. Again, Mr. Bryan's using the word kind of angled.
Yes.
All right. And then on the following page, I'm sorry, it's page 16 at lines 1 and 2. And I believe you already testified this, that Mr. Bryan didn't put quote unquote much emphasis on it, that being the angling.
Yes, that's what he said.
Did you have any idea what he meant by much emphasis?
Objection to speculation.
I'll rephrase. What did you take it to mean?
Objection to relevance about what Detective Lowry took it to mean.
This is two.
Directing your attention to page 14. Again, I believe that the state went over part of this with you on direct examination. Mr. Bryan told you that he was going to back up at Mr. Arbery. Am I correct?
Yes.
But to do that, he'd be following Mr. Arbery in reverse.
Just call time out. I think we got a juror that might need some water.
I'm so sorry.
We got some water on the way.
Yeah, so,
Okay, thanks.
I'm aware.
Okay,
Good.
good.
We're moving.
At that point, whether he used the words or not, he was saying he would be following him in reverse.
That he would be, no, I don't think that's what he says. He says, I put it in reverse and was going to back up at him.
All right. And then, before he could do that, he tells you that Arbery had run up the road. Am I correct? He, quote unquote, made his move to go down the road it happened on.
Yes.
And directing your attention back to the map, such as it is, that you're working with during this interview. In order to follow Mr. Arbery up the street, he's basically backing up away from him to do that.
Are you asking that?
Yes.
I don't understand. You're asking if he is reversing up the road following him?
Well, I believe you've testified that Mr. Bryan is fixing, I think that's the word Mr. Bryan uses, to back up at him. But by this time, Mr. Arbery has already changed direction and is running up the other street.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
So at that point, when Mr. Bryan is backing up, he's got to back away from Mr. Arbery to follow him.
I didn't see where he turned.
Oh, fair enough.
Yep.
It's hard to tell from what he's describing exactly what he's doing. Is that fair?
Can be, yeah.
And in fact, if I understand may I
May I close with you, John? All right, sir, and I'll try and use this device here again. Can you see the map, sir?
Yes.
Sort of, kind of?
It's upside down.
Does this help you? Assuming I can stabilize it. You see it now?
Kind of. It's just.
You're about to get a little time.
Oh, wow. That's so much better. Thank you. Thank you. All right, now see how much. Oh. Okay, that's not. Let me get around here. Detective Lowry, do you see this kind of L-shaped squiggle off to the side?
I do.
Okay. That reflects Mr. Bryan telling you that he's basically going down that road while Mr. Arbery's going up the road behind him. That's what that squiggle means.
I don't know what that squiggle means. This was almost 2 years ago.
Objection, Judge, if he could just let him finish his answer.
I thought he had. Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't want to cut you off, sir.
I thought I was done too.
Okay. All right. Promise not to use that thing again. All right. Now, did you ever ask Mr. Bryan what he meant when he said angle?
I don't think so.
It wasn't germane to the investigation at that point.
No.
Okay. And I believe earlier today you described it as steer.
Yes, I think.
Okay. And at no point did Mr. Bryan identify to you a mathematical angle, did he?
No.
So when we're talking about emphasizing angles or good angles or bad angles, we don't know whether that's a 90 degree, 45 degree, 180 degree, I don't even know the one in between, 225, 100. There's been no discussion of any of that, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And for the purposes that the state, when the state was examining you earlier this morning, did they ever ask you the distance between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan when these angling events or steering events took place?
No.
Okay. That would make a difference to you, wouldn't it?
Uh,
If you were investigating an aggravated assault with a motor vehicle, that would make a difference, wouldn't it?
yes.
I mean, say for example, you're in a patrol car and you want to talk to somebody, and maybe they don't want to talk to you, and you angle your squad car in front of them. If you do that 6 inches away from them, that's a little bit different than if they're 60 feet down the road, isn't it?
Objection to relevance, Your Honor. The hypothetical, as it pertains to this case, relevance.
So let's stick to what he knows and what was testified to in the statements. If you can wrap that together.
I think I can. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Did Mr. Bryan ever relate to you tearing up any of his neighbors' yards?
I don't think so.
Okay. Did he ever relate to you making skid marks or other marks on the roadway when he stopped short?
No.
Okay. So it would be fair to say then that any angling that was done had to be at a relatively low speed.
Objection to speculation.
I'll rephrase. Did you ever ask Mr. Bryan, and I think I know the answer, but I have to ask, did you ever ask Mr. Bryan at what speed he was traveling when any of these angling maneuvers took place?
No.
Okay. But you were out there at Satilla Shores that day, were you not?
Yes.
Okay. I think at one point you testified you went down at 220 Satilla, the English
Yes.
residence. And of course you were not very far from Mr. Bryan's house at that time.
Did you notice any unusual marks in the road that you thought might be related to this case?
In front of 220?
Anywhere on the scene that day? Did you see, and I'm not talking about the body of the deceased, I mean, that's a different matter. I'm talking about tire tracks, road marks, skid marks. Did you observe anything out there that day that would have suggested aggressive driving?
Not that I can recall.
Now, Mr. Bryan never used the word chaos in his interview with you, did he?
I don't think so. I'd have to go back and reread it.
But from his description of the events, would you characterize that description as chaotic?
Objection or relevance about how he would characterize the description of events, Judge.
Sustained.
I'll move on.
Are you describing based on Mr. Bryan's statement, or he was at the scene?
I should have been clear, based on his statement, what Mr. Bryan is relating.
Okay, that's sustained.
Okay. Did Mr. Bryan express to you uncertainty as to what he should do that day before the shooting?
Before the shooting? I vaguely think so. I'd have to go back and review if you could.
Okay, directing your attention. I have the line number, but not the page number. Okay. Directing your attention to page 5 to lines 18 and 19.
Yes.
Did Mr. Bryan express to you that he didn't know what to do
He did?
when he saw Mr. Arbery coming back?
Yes.
Did he express any eagerness to confront Mr. Arbery at that time?
No.
Did he suggest in any way that this was something he relished or looked forward to?
No.
And later in the interview, of course, and I got to be careful here, is it fair to say that there are times, during your interview with Mr. Bryan, is it fair to say there are times that he feels like he's alone out there with Mr. Arbery?
Objection to speculation, Your Honor.
I'll rephrase. In so many words, did Mr. Bryan essentially tell you that there were times when he felt like he was alone with Mr. Arbery out there?
I think I understand what you're trying to ask. If you're referring to the statements he made about Mr. Arbery trying to get into his truck, then...
At that time, did he describe to you being out there alone with Mr. Arbery?
I don't know that he used the words alone or described it in that way.
Okay. Well, did he use the words at some point he come to find out later? Do you remember that?
No, I'd have to look.
Does he describe moments when he can't see anybody else out there other than Mr. Arbery?
I don't remember.
Fair enough. Now, I believe you've already testified to Mr. Bryan, or reviewed Mr. Bryan's statement about Mr. Arbery trying to get in his truck. And I believe directing your attention to page 18. Do you remember the state asking you, suggesting that Mr. Bryan wished that he had hit Mr. Arbery?
Yes.
That's not accurately reflecting the nature of that statement, is it?
I don't know.
Did you take Mr. Bryan to be wondering aloud whether he might have in fact saved Mr. Arbery's life?
Objection to speculation.
Yeah, you're asking him what he thinks the statement might mean?
I'm asking him how he took the statement.
Okay, sustained.
When Mr. Bryan said that he didn't hit him, was there anything about his demeanor or body language suggesting that he intended to?
No, I don't remember which time he might have said that, but I don't know what body language would look like indicative of him actually doing that. He didn't seem any more distressed than somebody would be in, this kind of stressful situation.
Would you describe his demeanor as remorseful?
I don't know that I was around him long enough to see remorse. It looked more just kind of shocked.
Shocked. Okay. Certainly not gleeful.
No.
A few easy ones. Mr. Bryan, or you observed in examining Mr. Bryan's cell phone, did you observe whether it was password protected?
I don't recall. I just know from seeing the consent form earlier that I think it said no password or no passcode.
Directing your attention to the top part of page 2 of the transcript. Line 10.
Correct.
You recall asking him whether there was a password,
Yes.
and he told you no.
Yes.
And if there had been one, you would have asked him for it.
Yes.
I believe Mr. Bryan told you that there was lumber in the back of his truck during this incident.
Yeah, I think so.
Mr. Bryan told you that he got the keys from his house.
Yes, inside the house.
Okay. I got to ask you about the now famous video that Mr. Bryan made in Satilla Shores that day. I'm directing your attention to page 16, lines 9 through 25, through page 17, lines 1 through 12. If the state has no objection, I'm simply going to ask you to read that portion of the transcript, beginning at line 16, line 9. Page 16, line 9.
You said page 16, line what?
Page 16, line 9, excerpt 5.
Pretty good understanding of it now. So I think if I'm recalling correctly, when you're on the side of the road, you were telling me you might have had another video of the same guy on your phone from a previous incident. And Brian says no. I say, okay, I misunderstood that then. Brian says, no, I thought those two videos on there and I must not have been recording. And I say, well, the first you do, you said stop at 19?
I'm sorry, continue to page 17, line 12.
Okay. Well, the first you do have two videos of the same incident today. Brian says, well, one of y'all copied it somehow or another or something maybe. I say, okay. He says, I mean, exact same incident? And I say, yeah, it's weird.
I'm sorry, oh, you're turning the page, okay.
Yes. What line do you want me to stop at on 17?
Start with so you've got, I think it's at the top of the page.
He was asking where to stop.
Oh, line 12.
Okay. Got like the very last two videos, photos, anything. One is a longer video that contains the same, And Mr. Bryan says, they tried to crop it and send it, the original Officer Minshew. I said, okay. And he said, tried to crop it and send it, and he couldn't do it, so I thought there was 2 of those. I thought I had started filming him right before we got to the fork, before we got to the major intersection right there. I thought I had started filming there, but apparently I didn't. Apparently I didn't hit the button. I say, so you don't, from what I recall watching the video, it looks like it starts as you're like coming up this road, catching back up to them, like going back towards that intersection. Mr. Bryan says, yes. I say, okay, so yeah, like roughly though, you know, there's somewhere, seems like you start recording, because Bryan says, probably, yeah. I say, coming up that road and watching, as you round the corner, you can see him running. Mr. Bryan says, mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir. Now, you were asked a number of questions earlier about things that Mr. Bryan didn't say. Mr. Bryan did say that he'd heard stuff that's been happening in the neighborhood. That'd be page 19.
Yes.
All right. But at that time, you didn't follow up with him about that, did you?
No, not there, because I don't remember if it was before or after, but I'd already asked if he knew Mr. Arbery, recognized him, had ever seen him before.
Fair enough. You didn't ask Mr. Bryan whether his family had been victims of theft and property crimes in Satilla Shores, did you?
No, not specifically.
Okay. You didn't ask whether Roddy Bryan had installed a home surveillance system?
No, I have no reason at the time.
I'm not questioning your judgment of your techniques. I'm just covering a few facts.
Yes, sir.
Almost done. You never asked Roddy Bryan about his night owl video?
His night owl video?
Yes,
No.
sir. Do you know how Roddy Bryan's cell phone wound up in Sergeant Leska's car?
No, I don't recall.
Do you know how many officers besides yourself were on the scene that day without functioning body cams or dashboard videos?
I don't.
Okay. And it's not your job to keep track of that, is it?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, I'm going to use the word interview, but you feel free to explain, okay? But your interview with Mr. Bryan, my word for it, on the scene is not recorded.
Correct.
Okay. I don't believe it's documented, is it?
It wasn't a very detailed, thorough interview. It was just really viewing the video and then getting him to agree to come back and sit down and speak with me.
Fair
But
enough.
yes,
Is there any way for you to say how many other brief or other undocumented statements might be out there that day?
no, I have no way of guessing.
Okay. So is it fair to say by the time you finish interviewing Mr. Bryan that evening, I think it's evening, isn't it?
Yes.
By the time you finish interviewing Mr. Bryan that evening, he has been back and forth through the events of that day several times with multiple police officers?
I don't know what other officers he went through it with, but I could say probably. I know we spoke with it briefly on scene about it, and then again at headquarters, so I would say at least like twice with me.
Okay. And you may have been privy to some of that information, but probably not all of it.
Yes.
Okay. Things that you didn't ask. A lot of time spent on that earlier. You didn't ask Roddy Bryan whether he was armed or unarmed at the time of the shooting in your interview. Am I correct?
Yes.
Would that be because you'd already covered that out on the scene?
Yes. So I thought. I don't know that I asked him that on the scene.
Okay.
But
All right. Well, from the circumstances, it seemed clear to you that he was unarmed.
yes.
You didn't ask Roddy Bryan about Matt Albenzi.
No.
Okay.
Wait. Ask him about Matt Albenzi. What about Matt Albenzi?
Well, in terms of trying to understand why Mr. Arbery was running in the way that he did Did you ask him whether he and Mr. Albenzi had any contact?
Oh, no. No.
Did you ask him if he could see Mr. Albenzi?
No.
Okay. And of course, you didn't interview Mr. Albenzi. You don't know.
No, sir.
Okay. You didn't ask Roddy Bryan whether he called 911, did you?
I don't remember if I did.
Okay. And partly that would be because under Georgia law, Mr. Bryan had no legal
Objection,
obligation
Your
to do
Honor.
so.
Under Georgia law,
Should I rephrase?
Yeah, let's just rephrase it.
The subject of 9/11 never came up with Mr. Bryan, did it?
No, I don't think so.
You didn't perceive it to be pertinent to your investigation at that time?
No.
Okay. Is it fair to say that when you examined Mr. Bryan's truck, that you did not recover any prints or possible prints from either the front or the back of the truck?
No. Everything that I recovered was from the driver's side, aside from the unknown volleyball, soccer ball print on the back.
You did not recover any cotton fibers from the front or back of the pickup truck?
Just for clarification, you're saying like just the very, very front and the very back, excluding the sides?
The grill and the front bumper, the back bumper, and the tailgate.
Collected nothing from the front or the back.
Okay. And did the state even show you a picture of the front of the truck today?
I don't think I did, or I don't think I saw it. I don't remember there being one in there.
There's certainly no physical evidence to suggest that Mr. Bryan's vehicle made any contact on the front or the back or on the corners with Mr. Arbery.
I don't understand what you're. Can you rephrase that? You said it kind of like a statement.
Okay. There are no fingerprints on either of the front corners of the truck.
None that I was aware of. None that I processed.
No cotton fibers on either corner of the front of the truck.
None that I was aware of. None that I processed.
No fingerprints or cotton fibers on either of the back corners of the truck.
No.
The prints that you recovered, or suspected prints, and the cotton fibers are all on the driver's side of the vehicle, behind or at the door on the driver's side.
Yes.
Okay. And that would be consistent with the testimony or the statement that Mr. Bryan gave you.
Yes.
All right. And technically, let me see if I understand the sequence of events. Y'all decide on the scene that you want to do a crime scene work on the truck, right?
I didn't make that call. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody made the call. Okay. But at the time that decision was made, whoever made it, you were down at the Public Safety Center, correct?
You lost me. So are you saying that they brought are you asking if they brought the crime scene truck to the scene in Satilla Shores?
Okay. Yeah, I'm not helping you here. My
No.
apologies. You asked Mr. Bryan to
Yes.
bring his pickup truck from Satilla Shores down to the Glynn County Police Department Public Safety Center,
Yes.
just on the other side of the interstate, right?
Yes.
You asked Mr. Bryan to do that.
Well, no, I just asked him to come for an interview. He happened to drive the truck, and he told me about, the dings and the smudges while I was there interviewing him.
Okay. And this is several hours after the shooting at this point, is it not?
Yes.
This is after Mr. Bryan's been sent home, to your knowledge.
That I processed his truck?
No, that you, by the time you requested him to come downtown, he's already gone home with his truck.
I don't think his truck was still on scene. I think from the scene, he came from the scene to the PD for the interview and for the truck to be processed.
Okay, so you don't know whether he went home with it first?
I don't.
Okay. Is it fair to say that Glynn County has no shortage of car washes?
I don't know.
Did you observe any effort on the part of Mr. Roddy Bryan to tamper with or destroy the evidence in this case.
No.
Mr. Bryan wanted you to have the evidence.
Objection, speculation.
Is there anything more, thank you, Your Honor. Is there anything more that Mr. Bryan could have done to help you with your investigation?
I don't know.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
I'd cross it in if you want to break before cross. Restroom or whatever.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a 15-minute recess, and we'll come back for continuation of the evidence.
All right for the jury. Seated.
And a matter to bring to the court's attention before we bring them back in for cross.
I'm going to go ahead and have you step down. If you could please be back in 15 minutes for a continuation. I remind you, you're under oath. Do not discuss your testimony with anyone during the break.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Restroom? The matter is this, Your Honor. We had some testimony by this officer when the state asked the question on March 5th, 2020, you were not getting much traction in the case and the case went inactive. Remember that testimony?
I believe there was an
There
objection.
was an objection to it as well, but that remained the testimony in the court.
It was an objection.
I'm sorry, that was when the objection was imposed. It was not.
That's right, and so
I was
Larissa asked,
time stamping it in my brain, nothing
yes,
more.
and he
Thank you.
said, yeah, what she said, objection, it was inactive.
So I'm asking for permission to cross this officer on the fact that that's not actually true. This officer did a lot more investigation and action in the case all the way up through July of 2020, and I would like to go into the things that he also did. Now, that's going to cause some issues maybe with the state, because what he did are some of the things that the court has said we can't get into. For example, some of them are not things that the court said we can't get into, but the state has now given the jury the impression that this officer didn't do anything after 3/5, and that the case wasn't getting traction, was inactive until the case was handed over to the GBI. That's simply not true. This officer did a lot more, Your Honor. In fact, on 3/12, he received documents from the coroner's office that were gateway records for the Arbery, Mr. Arbery. On 3/17, he received a report about the blood in the case, the toxicology. On 3/17, on March 12th, he got some of the gateway behavioral records about Ahmaud Arbery. On April 1st, he got the autopsy report from the medical examiner. On May 29th, he got the full records of Gateway. And on July 14th, he got the heart blood results back that said there was positive THC. And whether he did this before the GBI got involved or later, he was still working with the GBI, dealing with some of these issues. And so it would not be accurate or fair to leave the jury with the impression that this officer ended his investigation within 12 days of the shooting. That is simply not the case, and I intend, with the court's permission, to bring the truth to light for the jury. Now, if the court says I can't do it in the way that I want to do it, then I just want to be clear about what I can and cannot do. But I believe the state has opened the door to us talking about what he's done.
Your Honor, the state's intention was once again to just smoothly transition this because nobody wanted to go into anything that took place about the real reason that everything stopped, because it's messy and irrelevant as to the guilt or innocence of these defendants. In this case, simply asking him, did you receive additional records on March 12th, March 17th, April 1st, May 29th, and July 14th? By the way, the July 29th and July 14th records came to him even though they were requested by the GBI. Is a simple way to go, oh yeah, there was some other stuff I did. This appears to be a very good strategy by the defense to try and circumvent your order and then put into play evidence that you have ruled inadmissible, such as the gateway records, the blood toxicology, and then the additional blood and the heart blood results. So the state would object fully to going into all of this because what they want is, how can I put this nicely? What they say they want is to show that this officer did some more stuff. But what they want to do is go into stuff that you've already ruled inadmissible in order to show this officer did more stuff. It's very easy to ask one simple question. Did you receive additional documents on this date, this date, this date, this date, and this date? Because all he did was receive stuff in. He didn't actually do anything but receive documents. And it was never the state's intention by asking that question, because it's our understanding that when we asked him, he basically said, yeah, it kind of went inactive. Those were his words to the state during the interview. Is that correct?
He said lost traction, then he said inactive.
Okay, and that's what he said when we interviewed him.
Yes.
So this is something that we don't feel opens the door to any of this. And if this is solely what the defense claims it is, which is, oh, this officer did do some more stuff, then it's real easy to just ask him, you received documents on this date, this date, this date, this date, this date, didn't you, as part of the investigation? Doesn't matter what the documents are, because you've already ruled that that evidence is inadmissible for other reasons. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the credibility of this officer or the investigation, because obviously Richard Dial will come in and testify that on May 8th, May 8th, he received the case and began his investigation as part of the GBI, which this officer has already also testified to. The GBI came in and took over the investigation. So we ask that you deny the motion. If you're going to grant the motion to go ahead and ask these questions, then the question should simply be, on these dates, did you receive additional documents?
Final thought, Your Honor.
We now have two affirmative presentations by the state to this jury that the case in the investigation by the Glenn County Police Department stalled and nothing happened. That was what they were told in opening by Ms. Dunikowski. And now the lead investigator on the case has been asked to testify that they weren't getting any traction and the case went inactive. And it is still, Your Honor, it's March 5th that they've established that that happened. We still have the rest of the month of March. We still have the entire month of April. And we still have a week into May before the GBI gets the case. It is our responsibility to help the jury understand the total investigation done by this department. The fact that they were thorough in their investigation, the fact that they did all this work in their investigation is important to establish. I understand the court has ruled. And if the court says, yes, you can ask them that they got quote-unquote documents or they got quote-unquote records from various sources, or if you prevent us from saying what the sources are, and we just are able to establish they continue to work on this case and follow up, I suggest that that's not enough, but I still think we need to correct this. And I would just ask the court to consider, they've now done it twice, it was intentional. And that is putting us in a position we are not going to be given a fair trial.
We're in recess for at least another 10 minutes, and I'll come back and I'll let you know where you are. see you. All right, we're back on. Defendants present, represented by counsel. Everybody's back in place. All right. As to the opening the door, the court's not going to permit getting into the evidence that has been excluded. If defense does want to follow up on the investigation, you're welcome to ask if there were any additional documents or any additional documents that came in. It didn't sound like he went and did additional work, so just so that I understand the scope.
Well, I think what these documents reflect and what his reports reflect is that he was interacting with the medical examiner's office still, that he was interacting with the crime lab still, and that he was also working with the GBI to obtain information and pass information along to them, and he was interacting with subpoenas about, these gateway records through the coroner's office. So he was interacting with individuals, with particular agencies, and he was receiving documents and information before the GBI got involved and then after the GBI got involved. So there's several pieces of information in there, Judge. You know what I want to get into, and I guess you would just be telling me I can identify the agency, I can identify the place the documents came from, or I can't. Those kind of things.
And yes and no. I mean, the court's excluded certain evidence, and so, no, we can't, for example, even if you're not going to get into the gateway documents, we're not going to talk about gateway.
Okay.
We're not going to talk about the evidence that's been excluded in the case.
So I can't say even medical records.
No, that's getting into the evidence in the
So
case.
I just want to be clear.
Talking about Arbery's medical records.
Gateway,
Those have been excluded.
right? So I can't get into that. The lab/toxicology received reports back from toxicology from the Georgia Crime Lab. They're still interacting with the Georgia Crime
At this
Lab.
point, I've not heard of any other way that they're coming in, and they've been excluded based on the court's order. And this has not opened the door to them.
I understand. So I can't say that he received documents from the Georgia Crime Lab.
What other documents are there?
Those, yeah.
It's just the toxicology reports.
I'm sorry, Jim.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding what we're talking about. The court's, I don't want to go back in and figure out all of the specific rulings
I'll tell you
again and
specifically.
how they would relate directly to these documents.
So the
Because,
record
just to be,
is just-
and just to be clear,
Yeah.
because I'm trying to make sure there's no ambiguity in the court's order. So the court's order exists. You're now asking me what you can put in.
Right.
What I keep saying is the court's ordered.
and I want to be so specific that the record reflects what I'm not allowed to do. And I remember the court's order that said we could not get in the toxicology records. That would be the blood alcohol and the THC. And you said we can't go into that. Now what I'm asking is, can I at least say that he received documents from the crime lab?
Are there any other documents?
Let's see. He got toxicology, and second toxicology. No, so if we say that what the documents are, no, I guess the short answer is
Because right now,
no.
the documents are irrelevant, so it wouldn't matter either way. So the court's deemed them irrelevant, so
Okay,
no.
and so I can't even say that he interacted with the crime lab.
I'm asking counsel that, under the court's order, that we
Okay.
not go there, because I understand the only thing he could be referring to is evidence that has been excluded.
Well, we can get around it, but I hear what the court is saying. So I can't inform the jury that he interacted with the Georgia Crime Lab. And he also interacted with the coroner's office.
What was, I don't understand that comment. We can get around that?
Well,
Are you
what I
telling the
could-
court you
what
get around
I'm
the court's
suggesting-
ruling? I don't understand.
What I'm suggesting is the court doesn't want the jury to know that there are blood toxicology records about alcohol or THC. But I certainly could say crime lab records. I just want to show that this gentleman is doing work with state agencies about this case.
I think you missed what I said. No, you're not going to get into that, because if the only crime lab records are excluded evidence, then no, then it's
Okay.
just not relevant.
I got that. I got it. I just want to make sure that our record is clear about that. And so that's a no on receiving toxicology on 317. That's a no. Receiving toxicology on 7/14/20. That's a no. Receiving gateway records from the coroner or giving records to the coroner, just that he's even interacting with the coroner, or that he's interacting with the coroner on 312, and that he's interacting with the coroner on 529. Will the court allow me to ask him or have him state, yes, I continue to interact with the coroner on 312, and I continue to interact with the coroner on 529?
The court's ruled. I would suggest that the simple way for defense counsel to avoid violating the court's order is to simply say that there was some additional work done, and he talked to some additional agencies and got some additional documents.
Okay, additional work, additional agencies, and additional documents. That's what I'll do.
And I will be clear about it, because I heard in there a statement that made me concerned when you said there's a way to get around that. I am not going to engage on prior orders that have been very clear. And so in order to avoid that, and based on where this is going, that's what I'm going to limit
Yes.
counsel to.
All right, so
And to perfect the record, of course, we are joining in this, but there is also one other piece of work that this investigator did, and that is that he is the individual who carried the heart blood from the autopsy to the crime lab for toxicology. That's just to complete the record of all the things that the court has ruled cannot come in, but would have otherwise been responsive to the state's question.
Okay, and then Judge, the one I missed is on April 1st, he received the autopsy report from Dr. Donahue. I don't think that violates the court's order to
I
say.
understand Dr. Donahue's going to be testifying.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I can tell the jury he got the autopsy report. I won't get into toxicology, or won't get into the medical records from Gateway, just that he received the autopsy report on April 1st.
Sounds like that's not violative of the court's order.
Perfect. All right, I'm ready. Thank you, Judge.
Good? Yes. Okay. All right, welcome back. You can, well, the jury's coming in. You can stay standing if you want. They're right back. I remind you that you're under oath.
Yes, sir.
All right, we got everybody. Yep.
You need to instruct the witness, Your Honor, that I'm asking very general questions that are not going to include details, so that we don't get worried here.
Well, why not ask leading questions, because that would prevent anything from happening.
And I wouldn't ask a question that requires a response that violates the court's order, particularly after the discussion we've had, because although there may be an inadvertent disclosure under these circumstances, the court's not going to look at inadvertent disclosure.
Yeah, I'm going
Maybe
to say
in the
exactly what
way-
the court said. Like I said, I just didn't know if we wanted to inform the witness how we were limiting his testimony. I'd be happy to do it, to avoid the problem.
Or let the state do it.
No.
So rise for the jury. Please be seated.
Thank you. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to proceed with the evidence. Mr. Sheffield.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Lowry. How are you?
Good afternoon, sir.
I'm Jason Sheffield. I represent Travis McMichael. We haven't spoken yet on
No,
this
sir.
case, have we?
No, sir.
Okay, but I have listened very carefully to your testimony and cross-examination, all that, and just want to bear down on a couple of things.
Okay.
First of all, you are the lead investigator in this case, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, and that's a special designation that you have been given, which means sort of all information in this case is going to flow to you
Yes.
while you wear that designation. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So in terms of doling out assignments or responsibilities, that is something that a lead investigator does.
Yes.
Once those things are completed, then you work to coordinate the receiving of all that information back to yourself,
Yes, sir.
right? Or then you review it, right?
Yes, sir.
And then that could cause you to make additional decisions on what to do next and who to tell to do those things.
Yes, sir.
It's sort of an honor to be the lead investigator. Comes with a lot of work, though, right?
Yeah, a lot of work.
A lot of work to that part. Okay. So in this particular case, how long after the shooting was it before you arrived on the scene?
I don't think very long, maybe 30 minutes to 2 hours, somewhere in there.
Okay, and when you got on scene, you began to do what a lead investigator does. You go around and you start talking to the officers on the scene to try to get an understanding of what's going on.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at that point, you begin to formulate kind of a plan to say, all right, here's what we need to do. How we need to follow up on this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And essentially, is it fair to say in your mind, at least within those first 30 minutes to an hour, you're trying to figure out who are these two gentlemen on the scene, Mr. Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael, right?
One of them, I was familiar with Mr. Greg McMichael just from him previously working.
Knew him previously, but you're trying to figure out what they're doing
Yes,
out
sir.
here on that day.
Yes, sir.
And you're also trying to understand what happened to the deceased.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're trying to figure out what their intent was that day, Mr. McMichael's in specific.
Yes, sir.
Right? And you're trying to figure out what was going on with the decedent on that day, Mr. Arbery.
Yes, sir.
What he was doing in the neighborhood, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, in this case, you assigned the interviews, did you not?
I did.
So you took on interviewing, as we now know, Mr. Rodney Bryan, and you assigned interviews to be done to Greg McMichael as well as Travis McMichael.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Now, you were talking about with the state that right around March 5th of 2020, that the case kind of went inactive, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But that's not exactly 100% accurate because you still were involved in doing some work on the case.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Yeah. You were involved in some, as I'll characterize it, additional work, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Working with additional Georgia state agencies,
Yes, sir.
right? And obtaining documents, right?
Yes, sir.
And didn't stop this work at March 5th. You continued in the month of March to do this kind of work, right?
I think so. I don't remember the times, but yeah.
Okay, but you also continued to do it into April,
Okay.
right?
Yes, sir. I guess.
Well, do you need to go back over your notes?
I do. I didn't want to interrupt you. Would you
No.
mind handing them to me? All I've got is the transcript. It's on the table there.
Okay, what about your reports and things like that?
I was told I couldn't bring anything up, so I have nothing with me on this floor.
Do you have your reports here?
Upstairs on the 3rd floor.
Okay, well, I'm happy to try to refresh your memory
Okay.
with the reports that I have of yours, unless the state wants to give you reports. Okay. I guess what we're after here, what I'm trying to understand is that, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? I asked the wrong person. I'm just going to show my reports. They have my notes on them. But you don't necessarily need to read my notes, but you can just take a look at the reports.
The last date I'm seeing on here, I don't see anything that goes into April. I see March 12th.
Okay, yeah. And now I'm going to ask you to come forward. I'm going to show you these things. Just to show you the dates, and I don't want you to read out loud what anything is. I'm just going to show you dates.
And I just want to make sure, because they're not being tendered in, we're not looking at, the jury's behind you.
Right, that's why I'm trying to block it
Okay,
and
I
put
just
them
wanna-
right here in front of me.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to show you these dates.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yep.
Session, one thing.
For that last one,
Well, we won't talk about what it is. I'm just showing you a date. You don't have to agree with it. I'm just going to show it to you.
yes, sir. Okay.
Okay, so just essentially, for purposes of dates, your involvement in the case continued into May and then into July. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, somewhat.
Somewhat, okay. Now, in terms of what you did in the case, I want to be able to be very specific about it, okay?
Okay.
So I like to write things down.
All right.
All right. So in terms of the work that you did, it, number one, includes going to the scene, right? You're gonna have to say yes if you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
All right. Interviews of witnesses, yeah.
Yes.
Photographs. Agreed?
Yes.
All right. We're collecting clothing, right?
Not I.
But under your
yes,
leadership
sir.
as part of the investigation, right? To do analysis on clothing, on gun shells, shotgun shells,
Yes.
doing some
that
ballistics work.
they would have went, I think, to the GBI. That.
Right, but it's under your leadership that you consider that this has to get done.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any kind of blood collection, right?
Yes.
All right. Videos from the neighborhood, that's something that you were interested in.
Yes.
Right?
Objection to mischaracterization, Judge. Mr. Lowry is saying that he didn't personally do any of this, and
Yeah.
Mr. Sheffield is making it look like he did.
As the lead detective in the case, we've established, I think, that you're directing people to do and collect various forms of evidence.
Yes.
Okay. Are these the things that you're directing people to do and collect, videos from the neighborhood?
Not all the directions would have been for me. Some of it would have
Okay.
come from supervisors as well. Like the videos, I don't think I necessarily even had to ask for that. I think other investigators just kind of started chipping in and collecting everything that needed done.
But as you're the lead investigator, I guess then you would be aware that these things are being done.
Yes.
And you would then have looked at these things to determine what next steps to take.
Yes.
Okay. That would include obtaining records, just generally speaking.
Yes.
That would include obtaining CAD and 911 calls,
Yes.
cell phone data,
Yes.
any kind of social media, if relevant.
I don't remember any social media.
Cross that one off. We got the fibers,
Yes.
the white fibers that you talked about. We've got fingerprints
Yes.
that you did. We've got mapping, kind of mapping out of this interaction that took place on that day,
Yes, sir.
okay? You actually went to 220 Satilla to do some investigation there as well,
Yes, sir.
right? You work with the ME's office, that would be the medical examiner, and the coroner, right?
Yes.
Okay? And neighborhood canvas. And so the neighborhood canvas is where you go around and you ask questions of all the neighbors to figure out if they know anything.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So this is what you did. You put you know, lead detective. Okay, all right. This is what you did. Have I missed anything in terms of the type of work that you did, generally speaking?
No, sir, I don't think so.
Okay, very good. You were asked a lot of questions about Mr. Bryan's description of his interaction with Mr. Arbery. You call that?
Yes.
And just to note a little bit of what he was describing about his interaction, there was this one thing that you noted where he yells out, "Y'all got him." Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. There's nothing that Mr. Bryan told you that led you to believe that Travis or Greg even heard him say this,
That's correct.
or that there was any kind of communication with him about this, right?
Yes.
So if I put down here no communication, by T and G, you would agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. The time where he says that, Robert Bryan says he changed direction and changed his angle. You recall that? I know he said that a couple of times.
Several times, yes, sir.
I'm an old science major, so I use the delta for change. And about the angle. Again, no communication with Travis or Greg about this thing.
Correct.
Okay. Talking about, we're still in this particular area, and for a second time, he steers or does some movement where Mr. Arbery goes and steps off the road, right? So if I say steer off-road, again, no communication with Travis or Greg about that.
Correct.
Now, when he says that, again, Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the truck and he pulled away from him, do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Trying to get in, pulls away. Again, no communication with Travis or Greg about that.
Correct.
By communication, I mean no phone calls, no hand signals, nothing.
No, sir.
Essentially, then it's your understanding that Mr. Bryan says that Mr. Arbery begins to run up Holmes Road and he begins to then follow at that point. Do you recall that?
Yes.
All right, so we'll just call that up Holmes and follow. Again, no communication by Travis or Greg about that.
No, sir, not that I'm aware of.
All right. And then when he turns around, Mr. Bryan discusses, he's turning around, he's trying to back up, and he heads back in the other direction. So let's just call this turnaround on Holmes. Again, no evidence that he was in communication with Travis or Greg.
No, sir.
You were asked a question about the white fibers on the truck.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And they were on that sort of plastic strip area.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to put back up Exhibit 214 for you to take a look at. talking about these white fibers
Yes, sir.
up here. We have a little bit more of a close-up around here.
Mr. Sheffield,
Yes, ma'am.
I can't see that spot.
All right. Yep. I'm gonna need some help with that. My three leg has become two. That's wrong. Yes. And I asked Mr. Rubin to stand here and hold this for a moment.
35 years of practicing law.
This is what he's been reduced to. Hold the pole. I think what you said about these fibers, though, is that they were located kind of above a dent.
Yes.
Okay. You were asked whether or not it appeared that those things could have happened at the same time, meaning the dent and the fibers.
Yes.
You have zero evidence to suggest to you when that dent happened, right?
I believe Mr. Bryan said it wasn't there prior to this incident.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
But you don't know when the dent was made
No, sir.
or when the fibers were made.
No, sir.
So it's hard for you to conclude that the dent and the fibers happened at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, you did do some print collection.
Yes.
Talked about that. I am actually going to need this, and I don't want you to have to stand up here. Let me use the gold one.
Yeah.
The prints that you collected, obviously you were told that there was some kind of interaction between Mr. Arbery and the truck, and so then you kind of focused in on whether or not you could determine whether there were usable latent prints on the truck, right?
Yes, sir.
Latent prints, we've learned a little bit about it, meaning left there on the surface, not sure who they belong to, but they're there for collection purposes.
Yes, sir.
Right? And one of the things that you can do with prints is as you look at them, you can try to begin to get an idea of how the hand was oriented when it touched the object, right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, depending on if there's multiple parts of the hand leaving impressions on something, then you might be able to tell how the hand was oriented when it touched the object.
Yes.
Right? And in this case, you've got not only a kind of a palm print, but also a thumb print. You recall that?
Objection, Judge. Mr. Lowry did not test the smudges in this case, so lack of personal knowledge to that.
He lifted the prints off the truck.
Not sure how to describe it. I mean, he said he lifted print. I've heard of palm print. Maybe we just need to clarify that.
I
To make sure.
am asking him the
Yeah.
questions.
Could you repeat it, sir? I'm
Sure,
sorry.
I'll show you. Looking here at State's Exhibit 22006. Let's start with this one. This is State's Exhibit 201. All right. As you lean into your monitor there, can you begin to see that there is a smudge here? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And can you see also that there is a smudge here?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you took it upon yourself to collect these smudges here and here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the first smudge is what appears to be a palm print.
Objection, Your Honor. He did not test these smudges to see what they were.
Have you gotten the results back from the lab about what these are?
He can't speak to that, Your
I'm
Honor.
just asking if you got the results.
Go ahead.
You gotten the results back from the lab of what it is?
Yeah, but I don't remember what they were. I think there was no match on either of them.
Oh. Did you say that you collected a palm print?
I don't know. I might
You
have.
haven't testified that you collected a palm print from the truck?
I might have, sir. I've been up here a while. I don't remember what I said.
Okay, fair enough. All right, but it was your understanding that these could be prints from Mr. Arbery, which is why you collected them?
Yes.
Okay. And in looking at this now, or when you were collecting it then, did you have any kind of thought as to what that might be?
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance about what he thought it might be. It was tested at some point.
So we took the picture for a reason, you can explain why.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Mr. Sheffield, I thought it was some sort of palm just because it was bigger than
Okay.
fingerprints would be.
And then you took a collection of this because you thought it was
A digit of some sort.
some kind of a digit, right? Okay. Are you at any point trying to do an analysis of how that, we'll call it a suspected palm print and suspected digit got there? Are you trying to come to figure that out in any way?
Yeah, just trying to look at it while it was there and processing it, but the only way I could, I guess, envision would be something like hand upside down, but I'm not a fingerprint expert.
Yeah.
That's just my own imagination at face value, looking at it while I was there.
All right. It's possible, or it's consistent, is it not, with your experience in collecting these types of things, that this could be a palm print and that could be, let's say, a thumbprint.
Objection to asked and answered, Your Honor.
Well, I'm talking about the orientation.
I understand. So overruled.
It could be, yes.
It could be, right? It could be that if this is the door jamb here, that the hand is like this. That's a consistent explanation. That's one explanation.
I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
The larger print on the side, it looks like it's up much higher than that. I don't think it would be upright. But again, though, I'm speculating at this. That's not.
Okay, well, we're trying to get into your mind as you're trying to figure this all out.
Yeah.
Okay, but at least it could be its own independent print of a digit,
It could be.
including a thumb.
Yes.
Okay. This is a closer picture of it. This is 206. Again, do you see that where we were talking about what we think might be a palm print, and then this right here, what could be a digit print?
Yes.
See it there in that one too? Okay. Did you notice when you were examining the truck, I'm going to show you again 201.
Okay.
You can look real close at it, and maybe I'll do this. Let me bring the photograph to you. You could look closely at 201, right up here at this part of the door. Once you take a look at it, I can put it back.
Okay.
Do you see what could be smudges up there as well?
I do.
Did you fingerprint or print those?
I don't remember the specific sections that I printed. If I saw it and knew it was there, I collected it.
Okay.
But I can't remember specifically if I took anything from that pillar. I think that might have been one of the photos.
You think that might be one?
Yeah,
How can you be sure whether or not you collected that or not?
I think on the fingerprint cards, it would have had sort of a legend, like a map on the car where it would have been collected.
You created those fingerprint cards?
I didn't create them. I just filled them out.
That's what I meant.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't manufacture the paper and press it and do all that stuff. All right, but this is what we're talking about up here, are these smudges.
Yes.
Okay. So if you collected it, then it should be documented somewhere.
Yes.
Very good, okay. And the information that I believe that you had in terms of making this potentially relevant to your investigation is you were testifying, I think, earlier that Mr. Bryan was saying that Mr. Arbery was coming for his door.
Yes.
Actually, on page 18, lines 10 through 13, do you still have your transcript?
It's on the corner of the table there.
Is this it right here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, page 18 there for you. He's kind of describing this moment to you right?
Yes.
He says, I probably got past him a little bit, and he comes up on me, right? And I could see him in my mirror, and he was coming for the door. Is that what he says?
Can you give me the line number you were
I
reading
think
that
it's
from?
10 through 13.
Okay.
I probably got
Yes.
past him a little.
Yes, that's what he says.
He's coming up on me.
Yes.
He was coming for the door, and I seen his hands on right behind the door, right?
Yes.
So this informs you that these prints that we just looked at could be highly relevant to
Yes.
his claim that Mr. Arbery was trying to get into his truck.
Yes.
Did you check for prints on the other side of the truck?
I think I did a walk over it, but that was the side that Mr. Bryan indicated to me that contact was made, so I kind of focused my efforts there.
Okay. I want to ask you again, do you recall whether or not you had ever decided that that one finger smudge that we think could be a finger smudge was actually a thumbprint? Do you recall having that opinion or thinking that?
I don't recall.
Oh. Sorry. I'm just going to refresh your memory with this document, see if it does. And what I'd like for you to do, thank you for stepping down.
No problem.
Is see if this refreshes your memory as the lead agent in the case about whether or not you were working to determine if that was a right thumbprint. And I want you to read it. I don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah, to see if that clarifies anything in your memory.
Yeah.
Don't read it.
Okay.
Just see if it refreshes your memory to see whether or not you were considering that that could be a thumbprint. Or a right thumbprint,
yes.
specifically.
Yes.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things that you considered is that this print next to this, what we could think is a palm print, could actually be the right thumb of Mr. Ahmaud Arbery.
Based on that,
If it refreshes your memory that that is what you were considering.
that wasn't mine. That was just someone else's suggestion that completed that.
I got it. But
Yeah.
you're the lead investigator, so one of the things that we're working through
Yes,
is
sir.
that you consider that could be his.
Objection, Your Honor. He just said that that was not his report, that was someone else's.
It was just used to
So no
refresh.
personal knowledge.
Would you finish your question?
Yeah, that as part of you being a lead investigator, and so I'm going to backtrack to help make it relevant, that you are relying on others to do work.
Yes.
That comes back to you,
Yes.
okay? And in the inquiry about whether or not this could be the right thumbprint, you said, I don't recall.
Yes.
I've showed you a document to see if it refreshes your memory that that is a subject that you were thinking and considering. Has it refreshed your memory?
Yes.
And did you consider that that was the right thumbprint of Ahmaud Arbery?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any further questions.
Yes, sir.
I think you've already gone. Okay. Let me just get my stuff out of the way.
Any reader?
Just briefly, Judge. So that report that was just shown to you, Mr. Lowry, whose report was that?
That was Investigator Lowther's.
Did you play any role in authoring that report at all?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so the findings in that report, were they your findings at all?
No, ma'am.
Okay, whose findings were they?
Christopher Lowther.
Okay. That's all I have, Judge.
Thank you. You may step down. You're released for the day, but you are subject to recall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes, sir. So I'm ready to move forward, but I also don't want to,
Just put these back.
that's fine. I don't want to cut a witness off too badly, so does the state have another available witness?
Yes, I believe, I have actually two, and I think they'll both be short enough, well, I'm crossing my fingers, and I think they're going to be short enough for the hour.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead to the state's next witness.
We will call Miss Kelly Parr.
I'm not sure where it went.
It was under the bar there.
Mr. Rubin, I was going to tell you to remember not to lock your knees if you're going to stand there too long.
You're known to pass out.
There you go.
Apparently the witnesses are on the other side of the courthouse. Okay. Maybe if we could get somebody to go and check and move the process along. There we go. Thank you for asking.
very clear. Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat.
Can I take this off?
Yes.
All right, please state your name for the record and spell it, please.
Kelly Parr, Kellieparr.
All right. And please give us the name of your parents.
Randall and Ann Parr.
All right. And are you familiar with the location of 232 Satilla Drive?
Very familiar. I grew up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I hate to ask you, but what years were you there when you grew up?
Oh, no. Let's see. 69 through 85? 86? Yeah.
All right. So, about 85, 86, you left the family home.
To go to college, right?
All right. Did your parents leave at that time?
No. No, they've been there, well, they were there for about 50 years.
Okay. When did they eventually sell the house and move out?
Let's see, July, is that 2019 or 20? Oh gosh, I guess I need to think about that.
Well, was it during the pandemic or before the pandemic?
Good question. It was during, so it was 2020. That's it.
All right, so you still live in Brunswick, Lynn County?
I do, St. Simon's.
All right. And I'm going to direct your attention specifically into the fall of 2019 into the first 2 months of 2020.
Okay.
How often would you go over to your parents' house at 232 Satilla Drive?
Usually about once a week, usually on Sundays.
Okay. What time on Sundays would you usually go over?
Afternoon, we'd stay until 7 or 8 sometimes.
Now, specifically, when you say we, who are you talking about?
Me and my son, my 16-year-old son.
Mm-hmm. And were your parents at this time living alone, just the two of them, at 232 Satilla Drive?
Yes.
All right, so I am going to direct your attention specifically to February 23rd of 2020, that particular Sunday. Were you at 232 Satilla Drive that day?
I was not there that day.
All right. And had you been at the house previous to that, like in the week or two beforehand?
Most likely. Like I said, we usually would go there about once a week on Sundays, so most likely.
All right. So prior to February 23rd of 2020, was there a bullet hole in your parents' front window?
No, definitely not.
All right. Now, on that particular day of February 23rd, 2020, were you talking to your dad on the phone?
I was. And I guess the reason I know that I was not out there, well, for obvious reasons, but also my son's birthday was 2 days later. We made plans to see them Tuesday instead of Sunday. So, yes, I was talking to him on the phone, and he was telling me about what he was seeing out the window. And during the conversation, he said, "Oh my God, there's a hole in the window. It's cracked." And so he kind of was shocked and then hung up and said, "I'll call you back." So, yeah.
Did you ever get over there to see the hole in the window eventually?
I think maybe a week later or a few days later. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly.
So prior to you coming in to testify, you and I have met, we've talked.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. And did you get to review some photos of the house?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to show you what's already been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 105. What is the jury looking at here, State's Exhibit 105?
That's my parents' house, or formerly my parents' house.
All right, so when we're looking at 106, is that the address right there?
232 Satilla Drive, right.
What's the jury looking at there?
That's also the front of my parents' house.
And then was this the window?
If-
The window that your father was talking to you about?
Right, that's the one at the far end, the left side of the house as you're looking at it, yeah.
This one or this
Mhm.
one?
I believe it was the one on the end there. Yeah, that one, the left one. I think that's the right one.
Now, when we take a look at State's Exhibit 114,
Mhm.
and we see this right here, had that hole been there before?
No, no. Mm-mm.
Now, when you're over on Sunday, where do you and your son and your parents generally congregate?
We usually stay in the back of the house in the family room because there's glass doors back there. It looks over the river, so we spend most of the time back there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ever any time here in this front room?
Sometimes we would go in that room. I play music. I play guitar and sing, and my mom does too. So sometimes we would go in that room and sing and play so Dad could watch the TV and we wouldn't bother him.
Okay. So what I want to ask you now is, at some point in time prior to February 23rd of 2020,
Mhm.
do you recall ever seeing a young man at the construction site that's on the way to your parents' house?
Yes, I do recall that. I'm not exactly sure when it was, if it was maybe December or January. I'm not really sure exactly when it was, but I do remember driving by, and I believe it was a Sunday, as usual, afternoon. It was still light outside, and I looked over and I saw someone in the door frame. There wasn't a door there, and he was just standing in the door frame, and we just kind of looked at each other as I drove by.
And was this young man white, black, Asian, or Hispanic?
He was a black man. He was very tall. You want me to keep going?
Well,
describe him?
Sure, go ahead and give the jury description.
He, from what I remember, he had like, I guess they were like basketball shorts on, and I believe high top sneakers and a t-shirt. And yeah, he looked very tall. I remember thinking that because of the door frame, where the location of it over his head.
Do you remember what kind of hair he had?
Hair, I don't remember exactly. I think it was fairly short, maybe a little, I guess medium length. It's fuzzy, but yeah.
So you were driving your car.
Mm-hmm.
It was still light out.
Right.
Okay. Any idea what time? I mean, you're talking January, December?
Yeah. It was, so it probably was getting darker at that time. So it must have been maybe 4 or 5, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still light out?
Still light out, yeah. Not real bright, but it was definitely light out.
Okay. Now, to kind of pin this down, do you remember if it was before Christmas or after Christmas?
That's a good question. I wish I could remember, but I'm just not totally sure. I'm not sure. Yeah. Most likely after Christmas, but I feel like it was late December, early January. I'm not totally sure.
Okay. And I'm going to show you 126. Would that help with where
Yeah.
you were standing?
Right. It was in that door on the right side there, I believe. Yeah.
I'm going to go and put it up there so we can.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
All right, so let's look at States 126. So I'm just going to point, was it this door?
Right, that door right there. Mhm.
Okay. And when you drove by, did you make eye contact with him?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any waving or saying hi or
No,
anything?
no.
Okay.
I remember having a dialogue in my head. Should I tell you about that? Like just what I thought. I thought I was driving by and I thought, what is he doing in there? And then I thought, no, Kelly, don't be racist. He's probably working on the house. And then I thought, well, no, he doesn't have a tool belt on. So I wonder what he's doing there, just the whole thing. So we were just looking at each other and I wasn't really sure and I just, kept driving. So, but that was like a split second thought process in my head, like 1 or 2 seconds. So, yeah, but no real, he didn't like hide or anything. He was just looking at me. So.
Okay, so tell me about that. So his reaction, he makes eye contact with you, and what does he do?
Yeah, he just looks at me.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt like, I guess I could have waved, but I didn't,
Did he try and duck inside?
No, just Just looking.
Did he run away?
No. Mm-mm.
Just stood there?
Just stood there.
And you were interviewed, I just want to make sure, on May 7th, 2020. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Okay. All right. One question? A moment? I'm going to go ahead and pass you over to the defense attorneys. They may have some questions for you.
Okay.
Mr. Ruth. Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Parr.
Hi.
Ms. Parr, my name is Bob Rubin, and I represent Travis McMichael. As I understand it, your parents, do they still live in Satilla Shores?
No, they sold their house in July 2020
And moved to Florida?
to Jacksonville.
Okay. But you grew up there, at least for a good number of years, and
I
then
did.
went off to college and eventually came back to Glenn County and lived
Right.
on the island.
Right, exactly.
But you would go check on your parents, celebrate anniversaries, birthdays,
Right.
holidays, and then just make sure that their general welfare was good.
Right, exactly.
Very close with your parents. How long did they live in Satilla Shores before they moved to Florida?
I believe it was about 50 years. So a long time.
So they're getting up there in age by 2020 in their 80s.
Right, exactly.
And there came a point where they and you were concerned about crime in the neighborhood.
They had told me a few things had happened, yeah, recently or before that, previous to that time, yeah.
Previous to February 23rd,
Right,
2020.
right.
And as their daughter, I assume that concerned you as well.
It did, yeah.
Did you ask them to install any surveillance cameras or alarm system or anything like that?
They did actually have an alarm system. They didn't have cameras, but they did have an alarm system that they had been in disrepair for a long time. And then I think maybe 6 months before this happened, they did start it up again. So yeah.
Okay, and that made you feel better as their daughter?
Sure, absolutely.
So when you would go visit them over the preceding, let's say from February 23rd, 2020 back 12 months, you would go during the evening and then you would go in the daytime, depending on why you were going.
Most of the time it would be in the afternoon, and then we would stay into the early evening,
Okay.
usually.
And you'd be there, and sometimes you'd be inside celebrating with them or hanging out with them. Sometimes you'd be outside enjoying the weather,
Right,
going for a walk
exactly.
with them, I assume. You have children,
I do. I have one son.
so sharing your son with
Right.
with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Odd
Yeah.
way to phrase it.
Yeah.
During the times that you were there in Satilla Shores at their house, walking around the neighborhood, would it be fair to say that you never saw Ahmaud Arbery jogging in the neighborhood?
I don't believe so. No, I don't think so.
And when you were interviewed by, I believe it was agents Hamilton and Carnes back in May, if you had seen Mr. Arbery prior to February 23rd, you would have told them.
Well, I did see him. I think it was him in the house, but I didn't. Yeah, right. I would have said.
You would have said, I saw him jogging.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So the one time that you did see him happened to be this one time in late December and January in the afternoon.
Right.
Right? And you saw a man standing in the door frame without the door at 220 Satilla Drive.
Right.
No tool belt.
No.
No reason you could discern from looking at him why he would be in an empty house
Right.
that was under construction.
Right. I guess so. Yeah.
Okay? In fact, you checked yourself, but it did cross your mind of,
Yeah.
why is this guy in that house
Right. Right.
on was it a weekend?
I think it was a Sunday.
Sunday
so that's
afternoon?
why I was kind of questioning it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you checked yourself and,
It's like,
wanted to make
no
sure you
big
weren't
deal.
stereotyping or doing anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
Got it. Did you talk to your parents about that you saw this man in the house?
I don't think I did. I think I just really drove away thinking, no big deal, you know. I don't think so.
But you were aware of their concerns, not only about crime in the neighborhood, but specifically about break-ins at Mr. English's house.
Okay, let me think about that. I'm trying to think if it was specific to that house, what I had heard. I think I just had heard that it was just general things being stolen. I'm trying to think of when I actually found out about the things at that house being stolen. That's a good question. I think it was more just a general, there had been some things stolen in the neighborhood that made me concerned. I don't know that it was specific to that house.
So at the time you drove by in December, January,
Mhm.
you personally were not aware of items being stolen from Mr. English's house?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I know it's a long time
I'm
ago.
trying to answer as truthfully as I can. I'm just trying to remember.
I understand.
Yeah.
Did you at some point, I believe it was in June of 2020, meet with Mr. Lee Wilson? He's got a mask on. Maybe you can take that off for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, it was on the phone. Did
What
you
would
have
that,
a
okay, I was going to
telephone-
say, what would that be in reference to? The,
In reference to this case, did you have a
Right.
telephone conversation with
Oh,
Mr.
wow.
Wilson? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. I know
Yeah.
you're trying.
Sorry.
When you learned about this case and the shooting incident on February 23rd, did you reach out to the Glenn County Police to tell them that you saw a man you were pretty certain was Ahmaud Arbery at that house?
I don't think I reached out. I do think somebody did call me and ask me about that, though. Now that you're saying, I think I remember talking to somebody about it. But I don't think I reached out to anybody. I think they called me. Because I think they talked to my dad.
Who said talk to Kelly?
Right, who said call me, yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Parr. That's all I had, Your Honor.
Anything from the other defense?
No, Your Honor.
Any redirect from the state?
None from the state.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Is she also subject to recall?
Yes, everyone's subject to
Everyone's subject to recall. All right. Ma'am, you can, you're free to leave. You are subject to recall, though.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
From the state.
And this time the state will call Ms. Kara Richardson.
Richardson?
Yes.
to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Go ahead and proceed.
Okay. All right, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Kara Richardson, CARARICHARDSON.
All right, and how are you currently employed?
I'm the director at the Glen Brunswick 911 Center.
All right, what does the Glen Brunswick 911 Center do?
So we process all, we're responsible, we're the primary, well, actually the only PSAP, which is Public Safety Answering Point for Glen County. So all 911 calls go through us. And we do all, public safety dispatching as well.
Okay, so what's the difference between public safety dispatching and all the 911 calls that come in?
So the calls are processed by, well, there's a myriad of technology that makes the calls come to us, but essentially we have call takers and we have dispatchers. So we have call takers that process the calls that are inbound and dispatchers that will send the appropriate response out.
Okay, so that I'm clear, if I'm the 911 operator, I'm taking the call for somebody who's calling in for an emergency, right?
Right.
Am I also at that time sort of typing in stuff into the report, or am I dictating it to somebody else, or how's this work?
Right. So we don't do an actual report. We do a record of call, which is, it's a public record of an inbound call. And the police officers or fire department, the respective agencies will do a report based off of the audio, their observations, and the notes in these calls. So yes, that's what happens.
So someone, so say someone calls in, is someone typing this in?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the dispatcher person, are they the one who's now going, hey, EMS, you need to go here, or fire, you need to go there?
Sometimes, if we're busy. If we're busy, everybody can answer the radio, the phone and or the radio, but we try to keep the respective, particularly the police dispatchers, off the phones. But if we have an accident on 995 or something like that where we get inundated with calls, anybody can be answering that and directing responders at the same time.
Gotcha. And you oversee this entire process?
Yes.
All right. Are you also the custodian of record for these records generated from the 911 call center?
Yes.
And within the 911 call center, how many people generally work a shift, like a daytime shift?
We have to have a minimum of 6 on the floor, but we typically have between 6 and 8.
And as part of the record keeping in the normal course of business for the Glen Brunswick 911 Center, do you keep both the written record as well as the audio file?
We do.
All right. And the audio file is basically what? The 911 caller and the person receiving the call?
Correct. We also have audio files of radio traffic that we keep on record as well.
All right. So prior to coming to court today, have we met?
We have.
All right. And have we also kind of gone over the relevant 911 calls that were given to the GBI in regard to the investigation into the homicide of Ahmaud Arbery?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And if you had the opportunity to review those calls as well as review the CAD reports?
Yes, ma'am.
And any extractions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's go ahead and at this time, for expediency's sake, the state is going to tender States Exhibit 141 and 142, the 911 call from February 23rd, 2020, made by Matt Albenze.
Which one is, I'm sorry, just which one is his?
Sure. 141 and 142, 141 being the audio call for 911 for Matt Albenze on February 23rd, 2020, and 142 being the associated CAD report.
Got it. No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Next, the state will tender into evidence States Exhibit 144, being the 911 call by Greg McMichael from February 23rd, 2020, and the associated CAD report 145. 911 CAD report for Greg McMichael. In addition, State's Exhibit 146, the sequential export extraction from that CAD report.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted.
The state will tender into evidence as State's Exhibit 147, the 911 call made by Greg McMichael from July 13th of 2019, along with 148, the associated CAD report.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Submitted.
The state will tender into evidence State's Exhibit 149, 150, and 151. The 911 call by Larry English from October 25th, 2019, parts 1 and 2, along with the associated CAD report at 151.
149 and 150 are the two calls on 1025.
Correct.
Okay. No objection.
151 being
No
the-
objection.
No objection.
They're admitted.
State will tender into evidence State's Exhibit 153, 154, and 155, being the 911 calls from Larry English from November 17th of 2019, along with the associated CAD report, State's Exhibit 156.
Oh, I got you. 156 is 3 calls. Got you. Okay, no objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted.
The state will tender into evidence that State's Exhibit 157, the 911 call by Larry English from November 18th, 2019, along with the associated CAD report, 158.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted.
The state will tender into evidence State's Exhibit 159 and the associated CAD report at 160 of the 911 call by Larry English from December 1st, 2019.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted.
And the state will tender in as State's Exhibit 161, the 911 call by Travis McMichael from January 1st of 2020, and 162, the associated CAD report.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted.
In addition, the state will tender into evidence as State's 163, the 911 call by Travis McMichael from February 11th, 2020, and the associated CAD report as State's Exhibit 164.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted.
All right, so, Ms. Richardson, if I live in Brunswick and/or Glenn County and I call 911, how does it get to you?
If you call from a most of our calls are now wireless, it'll hit off of a tower, and it's supposed to route you to the appropriate PSAP. So if you live on the county line, there is a chance sometimes that you might hit Camden, but for the most part, they're routed as they should be.
All right, so if somebody is a tourist and they're out on St. Simon's Island and they want to dial 911 for something in Savannah, that's not going to work, right?
It doesn't work that way.
Okay, they're going to get 911 here in St. Simon's and/or Glenn County.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, is there also a non-emergency line that can be called in order to get to basically the police to report something?
There is.
Right? And so if someone were to call that non-emergency line, would they go to the exact same dispatch location?
It depends if they're calling the 3645 number, which is our primary non-emergency number because we are a separate entity. It will go directly to us. Some of the departments will forward their calls to us after hours, so it does get forwarded to us, but for the most part, they're going to be answering their own calls during normal, their non-emergency calls during normal work hours.
So somebody calls Brunswick PD just directly, but no one's there to pick up, it could get routed to you.
Right.
Right. Now, if somebody is, for instance, in Douglas, Georgia, okay, but they want to call about something that's happening in Glenn County, they call 911 in Douglas, they're going to get Douglas, right?
Correct.
So they need to call a non-emergency line to get to dispatch.
Right, and just to clarify, the only time that could happen is if you are on a VoIP, because VoIP will basically bring to 911 the location that you're registered at. So That's the only exception, and of course, landlines are a direct, they'll go directly to the PSAP, the respective PSAP.
All right, so if I'm on a landline and in my house in St. Simons, that's just gonna automatically tell you where I am, and that's where you're gonna assume the emergency's at?
Yes, ma'am.
Got it. Okay. All right, so first thing I want to go ahead and take a look at is going to be State's Exhibit. I'm gonna have you look at 142 and 143. All right. Take a look at 143 and 142, and go ahead and tell us what the difference is between those two documents.
Okay. Okay, this is the computer, this is when we enter something into we're basically telling a story when we enter anything into CAD, which is their computer-aided dispatch, and it's a chronological story of events as we are told they're unfolding or happening. So this is a CAD report, and this is going to be the script that is annotated along with.
Can you let us know when you say this, what's the document number that you're referring to?
142, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Judge. So 142 is the story.
It is. And 143 is going to be, I can't remember the specific name of this, but this is what comes with when we download our audio from our, I'm sorry, our recorder.
Okay.
My apologies. Yeah.
That's okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take States 142 and 143 back from you.
I don't know that has a technical name, but.
So what we've got, so the jury can kind of see this, is 142.
I'm sorry, Ms. Castle.
Sure.
You might skip 143, I don't have it listed as new tender.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. If I failed to tender 143, the state will tender State's Exhibit 143 as the sequential export of the CAD report 142, being the recording from 141.
Yes, ma'am.
No objection. No objection.
So when we're looking here at the CAD report, we end up first with what right here? What is this, a call number? What is that?
That's your nature. Oh, yes, that's the call number.
Okay. And then what's the nature?
The nature is suspicious person, activity, package,
All right.
all encompassing vehicle.
And then when we're looking down here, in this particular instance, what is the date we're looking at in State's Exhibit 142?
2/23 of 2020,
And then what is the time?
13/08/24.
Is that military time?
It is.
All right. And who is our caller?
Matt.
And so when we then look down below, this is just something someone else typed in as they were speaking with Mr. Albense.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So then when we look at 143, which is the export, does this give us the same date and time right here?
It does.
And then what's DUR?
The duration, I believe, that's the duration of the call.
All right. And then it says it came into Glenn County, Maine. What does that mean?
So that actually that didn't come from 911 line, that came into our main line.
Right.
So our non-emergency line.
Non-emergency line.
Mm-hmm.
So then, directing your attention to States 145, States 145, is that the exact same call number as the previous one as well? I'll put them up so that you can see them.
Please.
So, is that the exact same call number?
It is.
Okay. So, when two people end up calling in minutes apart, but it seems to be about the same incident, does it end up on the same CAD report?
Typically, yes.
Okay.
Unless it's hard to determine if that in fact is the same incident that's going on.
So for instance, you can have a mile apart two car wrecks that have
Yes.
nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Okay. But in this case, we have this combined CAD report.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so when we look at this and we go down here, we actually have right here, what are those words?
Another caller.
All right, so just so I know, this typing is,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, so then this typing would be related to that time of day?
Yes, ma'am.
And then another caller that would be related to this time of day?
Correct.
Okay, so I got a question for you here. This time and date says 13/15/48, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and it's being taken in by P. Parker, who's that?
Philip Parker, he's one of our,
One of your 911 people?
yes, ma'am.
All right, but when we look at State's Exhibit 146, all right, related to the specific phone call from Greg McMichael, what time do we actually have right there?
13/14/09.
All right, and what was the duration on that?
4 minutes, 46 seconds.
Okay. Why is there a discrepancy showing this as a 13/14/09 call versus this one where it says another caller at 14/15/48?
Right, so I believe what happened, and again, they don't necessarily remember exactly what they do with the thousands of calls they process, but when that caller called in, he was naming that he was in a neighborhood. So we don't create a record of call. We can't really create a record of call without having a good idea of the location, and the location's got to go in and validate it along with the nature of call before that call is created. And I think what happened and what he believes happened is when he was trying to get where that was at, he realized, okay, this is related to this call. And so instead of going with that particular CAD event, he went ahead and put the information in the existing record of call.
Okay, so there was a time delay between the, hey, this is coming in at 13/14/09, and hey, I think it's related to this, so there's a later time when he actually types it in.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, but they got associated.
Correct.
At this time, the state is going to publish State's Exhibit 144.
Hello. 911, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm out here at Satilla Shores. There's a black male running down the street.
Satilla, where at Satilla Shores?
I don't know what street we're on. Stop right there! Is it? Stop! Travis!
Sir, hello, sir. Sir, where you at? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Stopping that at 1 minute in. The noises and voices we hear in the background of that dun dun dun, where's that from?
That's from inside the center.
Okay. Does anyone ever come back on the line in this call?
No, ma'am.
Moving forward now to State's Exhibit 148 and 147. Let's take a look at 148. So what is our call number up here on State's Exhibit 148?
887230,
And what date do we have?
7/13 of 2019,
And what time?
18/14/10.
Right. And is this Mr. Parker taking this again?
It is.
And what address do we have making the 911 call?
230 Satilla Drive.
And who is the person calling?
Greg McMichael.
This time the state will publish 147.
Glen Brunswick Communications, Operator 924, how may I assist you?
Hey, this is Greg McMichael. I'm a retired chief investigator with the DA's office. Is there anybody, supervisor available I might be able to speak to?
Sure, just a moment. And are you talking the dispatch supervisor or police supervisor?
Police supervisor, yeah. Anybody on duty be fine.
Okay.
I wanted to make more.
Okay, and all right, and what was your name?
Greg McMichael.
Okay, and a contact number for you?
912-217-1726. They can call me back if
Okay, and your address, sir?
230 Satilla Drive. We've had a lot of break-ins in this area out here, automobile break-ins. And my son and I just discovered a guy. We think he may be living under the Bluff Creek Bridge on 17. We just went up there and made contact with him, real shady-looking fella. And he, possibility he may be the one that's been breaking into all these automobiles out there tonight. Just wanted to make somebody aware there was somebody living under there. Hello?
And you want to talk to the supervisor or any police officer?
Yeah, or any police officer would be fine.
Okay, just I'll have somebody give you a call. Now, when they give you a call, it's going to come in as blocked, unknown, or unregistered, so be prepared to answer that, okay, at 912-217-1726.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Now, in regard to State's Exhibit 161 and 162. Looking at 162 right now. What is our call number?
989180.
And what is our date?
It is 1/1 of 2020,
What time?
11:05:39,
And what is the location of the call?
230 Satilla Drive.
And who's making the call?
Travis McMichael.
At this time, the state will publish State's Exhibit 161.
Brothers Communications, operator 915.
Hey, yes, I need a police officer. I got a report of I need a report of stolen stuff.
You what, sir?
I need a police officer. I need to report a stolen pistol.
Okay, and what's the address it was stolen from?
230 Satilla Drive.
It's 230 Satilla Drive, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
And your name?
Travis McMichael.
Phone number, Mr. McMichael?
912-423-1374.
What kind of gun was it, sir?
It was a Smith & Wesson M&P E9mm.
And when did it get stolen?
I'm assuming about an hour ago.
Okay, where was it when it got stolen?
It was in my truck. It was in my truck on the side of the road here.
Yes, sir. You see on the side of the road?
Yeah, right here at the house. Or actually in the barn, but
Do you have the serial number for it by any chance or paperwork on it?
I don't. I can get it tomorrow, but I don't have it right now. Oh man, I might have something somewhere around here, right in my gun safe where I can. I might have it. I'll look for it when I go.
You say they took it today, or?
I'm pretty certain this was within an hour. My father moved my truck for me. He moved the truck for me. I came out an hour later, and the holster was sitting in my seat. So I made sure I'm pretty certain they stole it.
Yes, sir. And what kind of truck was it stolen out of?
A 2011 Ford F-150, regular gas.
Did they take anything else out of your truck, sir?
No, ma'am.
And what color is the truck?
Red.
All right, I put it in for you so they have officer come out.
All right, I'll be out here waiting.
Yes, sir.
All right, happy New Year.
Same to you, sir.
And then directing your attention to State's Exhibit 163 and 164. What is our call number?
1012164.
All right, and what date and time do we have?
1927-13 at February 11, 2020.
And what location?
220 Satilla Drive.
And who is making the phone call?
Travis McMichael.
And what is this address here?
That's the lat long that is affiliated with the phone, so he called 911 from a cell phone.
From his cell phone. All right. This time time the state will publish. State's Exhibit 163.
What's the address of your emergency?
It's Attila Drive, 230 Attila Drive.
What's going on?
We've had a string of burglaries. I was leaving the neighborhood, and I just caught a guy running into a house being built 2 houses down from me. When I turned around, he took off running into the house.
Okay. What did he look like?
It's a black male, red shirt, white shorts.
And you said the house was being built?
It's being built, yes ma'am. It's vacant right now. He is in the house.
What's your name and phone number, sir?
Travis McMichael, 912-423-1374.
All right. Where are you at now?
I am sitting right across the street in my truck, watching the house. Watching the house with it right now. Right here at 61
Okay.
Mercury.
What kind of truck are you in?
A red Ford F-150.
Okay. You okay?
Yeah. It just startled me. When I turned around and saw him and backed up, he reached into his pocket and ran into the house. So I don't know if he's armed or not, but he looked like he was acting like he was. So, be mindful of that.
Okay. Which pocket did he reach into?
Left, I believe.
Okay. And now, so 230 is the vacant lot address?
It's my address.
It's your address?
It's probably
Okay.
228 or 226,
Might be 226.
possibly.
How many houses down is it from yours?
It's 2 towards the highway. I guess he doesn't realize we're here. He's got the damn lights on right now. He's got a flashlight going through the house.
Does he? Okay. You just stay where you're at so that the officers will know.
Will do.
Okay. And I'll stay on the line with you until they get there, just in case anything changes.
Roger that.
So you said he was a black male. Did he have hair on his head? Any other features you can tell me about?
I couldn't tell.
Okay.
He just looked like short hair.
Okay. Was he tall, short?
Yeah, he was tall, probably about 6 foot.
Okay.
There's the neighbors. I guess it's one of the other neighbors saw it. There's about 4 of us over here around it right now.
Okay. So what happened when you first saw him?
He's trying to sneak behind a bush. He was coming through somebody's yard, and I looked back, and
and he was trying to sneak behind a bush, and when I drove on by, he got behind a portal that they had to it. And when I backed up, he looked at me. I went ahead and backed up to the road, and he reached in his pockets. I kind of watched him, and he ran off into the house, and then stepped back out and went back into the house, and that's when I called y'all.
Okay.
But we've been having a lot of burglaries and break-ins around here lately, and I had a pistol stolen January 1st, actually. And, I've never seen this guy before in the neighborhood. And we've been kind of keeping an eye, and, sure enough, there's one, through the yards, Cops. All right, please, man.
You see him?
Yep, they're pulling up, coming in hot.
Okay. You can go ahead and let me go, okay?
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Can we have one moment? I will go ahead and pass the witness.
Ms. Richardson.
Yes, ma'am.
As the custodian of records for the Public Safety Dispatch, and this may seem like an obvious question to you, is there any mechanism by which you collect or record phone calls that people make directly to officers?
There is not.
And are you aware of officers who give out their cell phone numbers to members of different Bakers, residents in those different patrol areas?
No, ma'am, I'm not aware.
Okay, so there isn't anything, if an individual were not to call the regular Glynn County PD number, non-emergency, or 911, those phone calls would not be collected in any place that you care for.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Correct.
you.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate it.
Anything for the additional defendants?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor. Any redirect on that point?
No, Judge.
All right. All right, thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Is she subject to recall?
Yes.
All right. Ma'am, you're free to go today. You are subject to recall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're at a good breaking point for the day. So we're going to go ahead and recess until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. During the break, again, do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You're probably going to start saying it with me soon, right? Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. Don't go looking for any information about the case. If anybody approaches you about the case, please notify the court immediately upon your return to the court, and we'll see whether that needs to be addressed. So again, don't go looking for any information. Don't go picking up newspapers or news feeds or social media or whatever it is that may be out there. With those instructions, and again, all of the instructions I've given you, thank you again for your service today. It is appreciated. You're free to go, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
All right for the jury. Please be seated.
Anything from the state before we recess?
No, just a scheduling update for the court if the court would like one.
Okay, let me get around real quick. Anything from the defense, or from Travis from Michael?
No, Your Honor.
From Greg from Michael?
No, Your Honor.
From Mr. Brown?
I take it none of the jurors had an issue with Veterans Day? Then we have nothing.
All right, scheduling from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that we will, I know this is going to be hard to believe, we have a stipulation, and it's in writing and signed by everyone, which we will publish first thing tomorrow morning, and then segue into, I believe, Larry English's deposition. We have reviewed the timing on the deposition. It is in 3 separate videos, but it totals about 3 hours and 45 minutes. So I wanted the court to be aware of that. Mr. Camarillo will be handling that, and what we're probably going to do is have him seated more here because he needs to be able to put up the evidence at the same time on the split screen for the jury, and we've coordinated that as well. So that's, I just wanted the court to be aware, that's why he's probably going to move his chair up and sit here. And that we'll see how that, that day goes with our technology tomorrow, and I just wanted the court to be aware of that lengthy deposition presentation.
Okay, so we start, I mean, it sounds like we'll have to break probably in the middle of it for lunch, but.
It's my understanding, Your Honor, that when Mr. Camarillo plays the video, plays the 911 calls, we have a transcript for the jurors for each of those calls. There's 5 or 6 calls, I guess. These are transcripts created by the district attorney's office that we've all read and reviewed and agreed upon. I've just asked the court, what's the best way to?
I'm trying to think. Normally I charge juries on transcripts, and I'll tell you the charge and see if it fits. Normally, and again, this is just generally, so I'll run through it. Some of it may not apply. At this time, so I'm going to have to probably give them the charge before we get into it, but at some point during the deposition, you're going to hear a recorded statement. In this case, the only recorded statement we're talking about are the 911 calls? Okay. This is proper evidence for you to consider. Please listen to it very carefully. I'm going to allow you to have a transcript of the recording. So are we actually giving them a transcript of the recording?
Yes, we made 20 copies.
Okay. I'm going to allow you to have a transcript of the recording prepared by the state.
I think it's a joint exhibit.
Okay, prepared by, and maybe I'll go, let me just get through this. Let's just tell you what we do. To help you identify speakers and as a guide to help you listen to the recording. If you believe at any point that the transcript says something different from what you hear on the recording, remember it is the recording that is the evidence, not the transcript. At any time there is a variation between the recording and the transcript, you must be guided solely by what you hear on the recording and not by what you see in the transcript. Please do, and please do not read ahead. That's generally the charge I give them. I'll tailor that. If there's no objection to using that, I'll go ahead and give that to them.
No objection from the state.
I have no objection.
No objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Let's tailor that in the morning then. Okay.
I don't think there's anything else.
Do we have any idea of what we're doing for the rest of the afternoon?
To the state, I'll let you all talk about it if you want to talk about it.
We'll figure it out.
Is the court planning to start discussing the charge issues at any point this week?
I don't know where we are with the evidence. I have not made that plan yet, no. We're still preparing a draft charge, and the court's still working on everything that was given to the court.
Well, one of the reasons I'm asking is because I'm anticipating that by the end of the week, we're going to be doing motions for directed verdict. And
I'm not going to talk about the schedule. I don't need to talk about the schedule on the record at this point. Depending on where we are towards the end of the week, I may ask the state where we are. But at this point, just to be clear, still in the presentation of evidence. I understood that it would take at least a week, possibly 2, for the state to get its evidence up. I've got a draft charge that I'm working on and will continue to do so. So any insight I can get, but at this point I need to start putting on the record where we are with the evidence and what we're expecting time-wise. I'm not sure that that's necessary at this point. All right. Thank you, everybody. Based on all of that, then, we are in recess. We will reconvene at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Have a good evening.